My name is Councillor Philip Roberts and I am the Chairman of this board. Councillor Kane Parkinson is Vice Chairman of the board and is also in attendance. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live by the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. And with all this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and the press watching this live. Welcome to the Executive Councillors, Executive Support Councillors and members of the Corporate Leadership Team who are attending our meeting today. There was no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the chamber and exit the building via the front doors and congregate in the car park at the front of the building, where we will await further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure that their mobiles, laptops and tablets are on silent for the duration of the meeting. The hearing loop is now activated. A request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand and the Vice Chairman will make a note. We will now move on to the formal agenda of this meeting. Apologies for absence. Tom, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Woodruff, Councillor Davies and Paul Brewster, and we have Councillor Beecham replacing Councillor Woodruff and Councillor Vernon replacing Councillor Davies for this meeting only. Thank you.
Declaration of members' interest. Do we have any members who wish to declare an interest? Not like we do. This is minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of January 2026. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the 29th of January 2026 as a correct record. This can be found on the pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Yeah. Brooks and a seconder. Yeah. Parkinson. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. I believe that is carried.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry?
I wonder if I could just speak on the minutes for a minute.
We can indeed, Councillor.
It all went through a bit quick there, and sorry, I wanted to sort of raise it.
You can do.
On page 8,
okay.
It mentions the Grantham High Street improvements and the fact that the £2 million has been withdrawn from the budget. Members will probably be aware that there actually was a vote in this meeting that was passed, to recommend to the executive that it was put back in the budget. The £2 million was put back in the budget. I've got to say I wasn't able to come to the executive, but I was a bit disappointed, if I might say, and I understand it was a busy meeting, but when you were given the opportunity to give the report from the OSMB, you only were able to speak, or you only spoke for less than a minute, and you did, in fairness, refer to, you didn't mention the £2 million, okay, there were lots of other things to mention, but you did refer to a summary of the what had gone on at the OSMB. At the previous meeting. I wasn't able to be at that meeting, but I was listening in and I looked for that summary online and it wasn't there. There was no papers printed with the agenda until well after the meeting. And I just happened to, one of the papers that is there, and here's a question, that sits there now, talks about a corrected version of the budget papers from OSMB. So I wondered what was the, that may be in the, excuse me, Nigel, that may be in the executive, from the exec. I'm really asking what was the correction, or was it simply, and maybe Michelle might help, was it just an update from the previous, the way that things had changed sort of thing? But it's the word correction, and I'm really sort of asking what was wrong with what was printed before, if anything.
Sorry, Chairman.
Or was it just an update?
Without any notice, I'm not really sure. I can't really answer that question. I think I need to take that offline.
I was going to say, perhaps I'll write to you then, Nigel, and with that particular inquiry.
I mean, the minutes are there for council. When you said that you wanted to talk on the minutes, I thought you were going to challenge the accuracy. The minutes are there, and if you feel there's something inaccurate in the minutes, then that's your opportunity.
Well, what I was going to say about the accuracy, I'm a bit disappointed that the vote wasn't mentioned. There's no mention that there was a vote on the recommendation. It does say, in fairness, you know, that there was members recommend to the executive formal reinstatement. I do have a question though on it, and it does at the bottom of page 8 talk about members asking for a clear commitment and funding route to be set out formally in future budget papers regarding the £2 million for Grantham. Has that commitment been forthcoming? I think I know the answer, but I sort of ask that. And generally, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if you just indulge me a second, you know, at last Friday at the budget meeting, you know, I was challenged, great idea, for example, on libraries, great idea. Oh, why didn't you mention it before? I did in this meeting. Now, it is broadly, it's mentioned that and other sort of points, flooding, for example, is mentioned. But, you know, I raised it in this meeting, which goes to the executive. But I'm not sure those messages from this meeting got through to executive. I'm not sort of criticising particularly. I'm just sort of asking. In future, it'd be really helpful if perhaps if you got more time to speak at executive, to give a fuller indication as to what's happened here, because you know when an executive member says, "Oh, why didn't you mention it before?" Great idea, but I did. I went through the process, which I thought was the proper way of doing things. Thank you. Sorry to go on.
That's fine, Councillor. Councillor Parkinson.
So I think within this paper it does state on the minutes that the members recommended to the executive the formal reinstatement in the post-capital programme. So it does say that on there. And I believe Councillor Gibson was at the OSMB meeting when that happened, I think, if I'm wrong. Might have been Tom. There you go. I know someone was here. So see, the executive were aware of the recommendation. No, sorry, I think Councillor Catton was here during the OSMB meeting when that motion passed through this council. So it is in the minutes that we recommended it. I know it's not explicit, there was a vote, but it does mention in there that this committee recommended the reinstatement.
Yeah, I appreciate Councillor Casson was, of course, but others weren't, and it is that, I mean, what were those papers, did executive actually have that paper? Because, you know, when it went to executive, it was on, the only mention of it was on page 22 of a document. Now, I don't know if executive had that document ahead of the meeting, at the meeting, or whether they actually had time to read it and actually absorb it. Because clearly, the executive member, you know, for libraries, you know, clearly hadn't sort of seen anything on that before.
Chairman, I can take this.
I just make the point that it's really difficult to sort of get through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Councillor Hill, I believe you wanted to...
Yeah, well, I do have quite a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Dilks has said. You know, we had a long debate at this meeting about the budget, which I thought was quite productive. I think most of us spent quite a lot of time looking at the details of what's proposed, as we do with all the papers, and I think we just want reassurance that anybody's taking any notice. Because I did watch, I mean, obviously there were 3 members of the executive here at last meeting, and I did thank them for coming, as we got 2 here today, which is good to see. But I did actually watch the broadcast of the executive meeting. I have to say your summary of the budget was extremely brief, but then was quite extensive in other parts of the agenda, the executive agenda and comments going forward. And we've had debates before about when we keep being told you can't have votes, don't worry, we'll tell the executive they'll get a full report of what was discussed, etc., etc. I have to say, on the last executive meeting, I was not at all confident that the summary given was a fair reflection of all the debate we had. Because the point of scrutiny is not to catch people out or challenge people, it's actually to have other people debating so that if you're on the executive, for example, you can at least hear what's been said, and I'm sure there will be some things which were done. And although there was a sort of a brief mention of the £2 million for Grantham, I don't think it was given particular credence, and I understand the papers presented were very brief, which the more substantial papers were then, this is for the executive meeting, were then presented later. So I have to say, if we're not going to be voting and we're not going to be confident that we're actually, what we say and deliberate on is not going to be properly reflected, you have to start saying, well, why should we bother coming? Because if nobody's going to take any notice, well, Frank, at least we know where we are. We can have our debates, all our debates on social media instead. So I do think it does need to improve. Either we get votes, so we vote here, or we need more confidence that what we're discussing is actually reflected somewhere. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. On that, I would have said that, first of all, that the executive can read the minutes, and it's all in there, so the executive can read the minutes. The idea about the report that I give at the executive is not to read all the minutes out and go into a lot of detail.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, Chairman. Minutes aren't available because the minutes have only just been agreed today. I'm saying the minutes are one thing. I think what I'm after is a summary, and probably a better, I mean, I just find it very strange that the most important debate we probably have in this council is the budget debate, and it was what we spent quite a lot of time debating, was quickly hardly referred to in any detail in the verbal report. I don't know what you received from council officers, you know, to reflect back to the executive, but I just felt that at that one time it didn't feel sufficiently full to actually in light of what we said. Whereas on other items, you spoke quite a bit on those. I just thought it was very strange, but I'll leave it there. I think it's just a comment, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Crookham.
Yeah, not to comment on what wasn't said, but the day before the executive meeting, just for clarity for the committee's benefit, over 20 pages of committee feedback was provided to the executive across all of the service scrutiny committees and this one, including comments about the Grantham Street Works project. So just for the benefit of the committee, about 20 pages of written feedback to aid the executive in their decision making.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think in the actual meeting on Friday, the full council, I think, because of the amendments that you brought forward, I think we discussed quite a lot about the library situation. And I think it was mentioned about the fact that you could use your, and pardon me, I don't know what the fund's called, but you can use your fund to go towards that. And also regarding the Grantham Relief Road situation, and about putting the actual money forward, or putting it in the actual budget, I think it mentions about forward budgets. I'm sure that when the Grantham Relief Road's finished, or looking like it's going to be finished, that you will keep us, will remind us about the £2 million. So I don't think it's ever going to get forgotten. So you can rest assured that that will be in the budget when the actual relief road's finished. Okay, thank you. Right. We had the vote, didn't we? That's fine. 4, announcements of a chairman, executive councillors with chief officers. I have no announcements to make today. Are there any executive council announcements from the executive councillors present today? Thank you, Councillor Catton. Are there any chief officer announcements? You have to bear with me because I'm looking in different directions now. Oh yeah, and it's messed me up completely. The change around of, I know, it's like watching tennis. So I completely throw me out in the opposite direction. So excellent. So no officers' announcements. Tom, are there any call-ins to consider?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Have we received any councillor call-ins for action?
None
I've asked
received.
that one. Excellent. Right, on to the formal agenda. Agenda number 7, a crisis and resilience fund. This pre-precision scrutiny report can be found on pages 19 to 30 of the agenda pack. This report invites the board to consider the council's proposed approach to implementing the new 3-year government crisis and resilience fund, which will replace the household support fund and discretionary housing payments from April 26. The report is due for consideration by the executive on the 3rd of March. The views of the board will be reported to the executive head of this meeting. This report will be presented by Anne-Marie Scott, Assistant Director of Public Health. Now over to you, Anne-Marie Scott, over here. Thank you. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So this report sets out the government's new Crisis and Resilience Fund, which runs from the 1st of April until March 2029. And this represents a shift towards a longer-term preventative approach, while still ensuring that people on low incomes can access support when they face an unexpected financial shock. For Lincolnshire, the provisional allocation is £9.9 million per year in the first 2 years. This rises to £11 million a year, in the third year, when housing payments become fully integrated. So the fund itself has 4 required delivery strands, the first being a crisis payment. This is primarily application-based, provides supports to residents on a low income who experience a sudden unexpected drop in income or are unable to meet urgent needs such as food or essential bills. People accessing this strand of payment will be referred to resilient services to help address their core concerns. In Lincolnshire, it's proposed the strand will be delivered by district councils using a consistent criteria. The second strand is housing payments. These broadly mirror the existing discretionary housing payments administered by district councils. In the first 2 years, district councils will continue to deliver this with separate government allocations. Funding will then move to unitary and any remaining upper tier authorities in year 3. The third strand is resilience services. These services are designed to build residents' financial capability, reduce problem debt, and lessen reliance on crisis payments in the future. The proposal for Lincolnshire includes a single county-wide financial support service, which will focus on supporting people with significant debt issues through a community outreach model. This will be complemented by lower-level support through enhancements to existing services which provide help with household budgeting and income maximisation. It is also proposed to support a 3-year test and learn project to help care-experienced young people develop life skills, confidence and financial resilience. Finally, district councils will receive funding to commission local activity through community and voluntary sector partners. The final strand is community coordination. Lincolnshire already has a strong foundation through the Financial Inclusion Partnership, and work is underway to assess the local support landscape, identifying gaps and strengthening referral pathways so that residents can access support more easily without repeating their story multiple times. Insights from crisis payment data will continue to inform this strand over time. Authorities are to begin delivery from the 1st of April, and they're required to submit a delivery plan by the 1st of July. This plan must be approved by the Deputy Leader as the Executive Councillor for Community Engagement. However, because the guidance was only published in January and significant cross-partner work is required to design the full model, the report recommends delegating authority to the Executive Director of Adult Care and Community Wellbeing in consultation with the Deputy Leader to finalise the delivery plan and put the necessary arrangements in place. In conclusion, the proposed approach for Lincolnshire maintains consistency across the county while allowing for local flexibility. The fund offers a significant opportunity to strengthen both immediate crisis response and longer-term financial resilience across Lincolnshire. Delegating authority will enable the programme to progress at pace and ensure that Council meets national requirements while maximising the impact of the Year 1 fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. We'll now move on to the members' debate. Councillor Parkinson, do we have any speakers? Right, we'll start with Councillor Collier. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's too many gadgets in front of me here.
Yeah.
I was just interested to read where you it stated in the report about cash being handed out to people in need. and I'm always sympathetic to that. Having worked as a supervisor in a major supermarket years ago, I often had to go, when a voucher would come through, to just discreetly make sure that appropriate things were being purchased on that voucher. I worry about the cash being handed out because of abuse of that. How can that be monitored? Do they have to produce receipts afterwards to say what they purchased? Very rarely with a voucher did we get someone try and bring something through the checkout that wasn't an emergency item. But I do worry about the cash, handing out cash like that. And I don't mean to distrust people, but if someone is in a situation where they are addictive in something, in some form, who's monitoring this? How is this going to be monitored with this cash payout, please?
Anne-Marie.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the guidance does aim for a cash first but not cash only approach. Part of the plans as we work through the scheme are what evidence do we want to look at to ensure someone's eligibility, and therefore what might be appropriate in terms of a form of support. So that could be a supermarket voucher, it could be cash through a cash point, or it could be goods. So for example, if someone's washing machine has broken down, it could be the direct provision of those goods. Certainly if we are looking at someone's bank statement as a precursor to understanding their need, it would be possible to potentially see if there were regular payments to perhaps gambling sites or somewhere where you might think that cash may not be appropriate for that person in those circumstances. So yes, while it is cash first, it is not cash only, and that will be very much based on individuals and an assessment of what may be most appropriate for them, or of course what might be the need. If they need food, it can of course be appropriate to have a supermarket voucher, and those which are used do prevent them being used on cigarettes and alcohol. They're not open vouchers that you might perhaps purchase as a gift from a supermarket.
Can I just come back on
You
that,
can,
please?
Councillor Collier.
Just though, so if you are, excuse me, I've got something in my eye. If you are handing out cash, do you require a receipt back from that person to show what they have spent it on, please?
So this is something we want to work through with our audit team. We recognise we really need to be proportionate on what that might be. So if someone has received a £20 voucher for some item for that week, is that proportionate? But it may well be that we put in place provision where a larger item or a larger purchase, we would ask for some sort of evidence, but we do need to be proportionate against the administrative burden for the amount of money that is handed out. The guidance itself is silent on those and leaves it to local discretion.
Sorry, can I come back again? I'm still concerned about the cash element here. You just don't know what people will be spending it on. They are cash at the end of the day, those who have paid tax into the system. And I'm not begrudging anybody assistance whatsoever. I've been in that assistance stage myself many years ago. But I do worry about the abuse of this, and it's our taxpayers' money.
Yep, certainly understand that, Councillor Collier, and it is obviously concerns that have been raised by other councils at sessions we've had with the DWP, who administer this scheme. They are putting a session on next month around cash first, so we can hopefully learn from them and what safeguards they think are proportionate, but also working with our audit team, as I've said, to put something in place. But certainly where there's a mechanism to use an alternative, then we would look in all cases where we could to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Just fully support what Councillor Collier's line, because it's the one thing to strike out. And I think that we had a debate at council about it's not our money, it's obviously government money. But the same thing is, and I think on balance we felt that for the other item, in terms of the ILP, we thought it was worth doing. A majority thought not. Well, that's fine. But in this case, I do think, although it's not council money, it is still government money. And I think we all would agree that those people who fall into crisis, either for illness or losing jobs or whatever, should be supported, but it is a turnaround, and I appreciate this is the DWP guidance. DWP, who have not got a fantastic reputation for giving value for money for the taxpayer, I have to say, and that is actually turning on its head our policy, hitherto policy over the Household Support Fund, where cash was actually the last resort. And I think we took the attitude, as we took with the COVID cash that was made available, we actually had a policy where we said to people, we're not going to be quibbling, we're very supportive, but come with your issues and we'll see what we can do to help you. We won't be ticking boxes or anything, but cash will not be cash. A lot of other authorities just issued cash. They ran out of their budgets, where our budget was underspent, which does tell you something. So I think it's a big mistake, just because I can guarantee if people are just given cash, they will spend it. They'll come up with ways of why it will be. There's the main issue about there's a difference between being in crisis and then getting back on your feet, or that suddenly some people have a crisis every year or whatever, so every year they need a bit more cash. So I know it's guidance, and I know obviously we've had long discussions about this, but do we have to follow the guidance? Because I am very concerned about this. We are talking about big sums of money, £9 million. So we want to make sure that the support goes to where it's really needed. And it's mostly in kind, and was it furniture, was it housing issues? Just doling out cash because somebody applies for it does not seem to me the best way forward, and doesn't actually protect those people who really need it, as opposed to people perhaps aren't delivering. So I hear what's being said about, well, there'll be training, but I don't think that's going to. So I suppose the ask is to the deputy leader is, can we make sure that, I don't know how binding this guidance is, make sure that cash is not the first resort and it actually is the last resort. The key thing is we make sure we actually, and this is about what's supposed to be about one-off support, not regular support. And as we know as councillors, one thing that gets people really angry is when they're going to work and they feel that somebody down the road isn't going to work and they seem to be better off, whether that's justified or not. But I think it needs to look after. So I suppose, can we sort of nod to the guidance and then carry on as, which I thought was a useful system. What I'd like Anne-Marie to do as well is, could you just summarise how effective the current system is, the Household Support Fund, just so that we understand, what worked and what didn't work and what could work better under this new system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Would you like to come back, Anne-Marie? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. We'll work with the DWP on how we can ensure that cash first and the balance of that against other goods. So thank you, Councillor Hill. We'll take that forward. Just in terms of the Household Support Fund, yes, it was almost identical amount of money. That was focused through crisis support with very little resilience built into that, so that is a different model. Although we did support through each round of the crisis support around 35,000 households with children in receipt of free school meals eligibility, and then through our district councils around £3 million through each round was distributed in crisis payments out through that. That has been going since, I think, 2020. It was short-term funding, so it was either given on 6-month or occasionally annual basis, so it was quite difficult to plan for a future scheme. But certainly we've learned a lot together with our district councils in terms of what works, and built a number of connections out into the voluntary sector and the community that are invaluable in informing our approach to the new fund.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Councillor Hill, to come back.
I suppose the key thing to me, guidance is guidance, it's not legislation. So the key question for me is, okay, you've given your guidance, thank you very much, but we'll do it the Lincolnshire way. Is there then a risk that there'll be a penalty? They'll say, oh, well, unless you do it. I suspect not, because the DWP, well, I'll say no more about the DWP. They're not the most effective of government departments, shall we say. I suppose the other thing is, which I didn't quite understand, are we now saying all the money, nearly all the money will be given to the districts. Because I probably misunderstood, because there's 3 sections, aren't there? So you did say I forget what it was called, the first one you referred to, that will still be managed by the county as will it? Because I know the housing bit is we give the money to the districts to do what they think best, but the other bit, I was a bit confused, and probably my fault.
Anne-Marie.
So the crisis payments will be managed by the district councils. They will have a consistent eligibility criteria, and it will be through an inter-authority agreement with the county council that sets out how that occurs. The resilience services, the majority of those will be managed via the county council, and the guidance requires that we spend a significant proportion on resilience. So it is a split, but very much with controls in place and, importantly, a consistent eligibility criteria. So no matter where you are in the county, the same criteria will be applied.
So the 9 million, how much of that will be handed over to the districts?
So we're still working on the split for that at the moment based on need, because it is a very different scheme to the Household Support Fund. But we are looking at probably around 40% of that fund would be distributed out via the district councils in total, which is not dissimilar to the proportion that went out under the Household Support Fund. It's a little more.
Just one more, I'm sorry.
It's fine, no, it's okay. It's very confusing, don't worry.
It is confusing, because when you look at the previous scheme, I was trying to compare whether it's like with that. It's not really, is it, part of it? The other thing is that obviously it's all been, recommendations are to delegate, which I'm no problem with. I mean, obviously we've been aware since June, haven't we, that there would be a change. But I see we don't have to put our final submission in until July. So is there any reason why it can't, whatever's worked out, can't come back to this committee, say, in the June meeting, just so we can see? Because there's no detail here at all. All we're being asked to do here is agree the principle, which I think we all would agree with, but I can't see, is there a problem with coming back in, say, the June meeting? This is what the scheme will look like. I've just asked a question.
Councillor Gibson.
I would welcome that, Chairman, if that's
yeah, I think
okay with you, sir?
I think we all would on that one. I think it's especially when you're involving extra complication with using the obviously we're working together with the districts. I had a long conversation with Sean, I can't remember his second name, the other day about it, and a great detail about it. And my concern is I deal with a lot of people's finances, and I see people on benefits a lot. And the one thing, I'm not sure it's your area, Anne-Marie, but the one thing I see a lot is that there's children that are on free school meals, and when they get their free school meals allocation or the acceptance, it never gets reviewed. And I've known people that have gone from being on the uppers to earning lots of money, and their kids are still getting free school meals. Now, I'm not saying it's your department, but it certainly needs to be something that's reviewed on a regular basis. It might have something to do with DWP, but again, they don't review people as much as they should do. But I had a very good conversation with him about it. And one thing that I think is important is that that Citizen Advice Bureau is included big time on this. That I've dealt with them before, they deal with lots of avenues and they're professionals, and there's lots of money going into it, isn't it? With the Citizen Advice Bureau, I think we're funding the CAB quite a lot to help out on this, and they're the experts on it. They'll deal with all the different avenues, and that's the positive thing that I took from it, because I totally agree about the cash situation, because who uses cash now anyway? You know, if you've got cash, it's, you know, it can be anything. If people are getting cash, it's very easy to abuse the system, where if they get a brand new washing machine, then you might see it on eBay the next day, but it's a bit more difficult to try and sort of mess around with. But so I've digressed slightly. I had a really good conversation about it the other day. So anyway, on to Councillor Findlay. Would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a lot of mine's been covered, to be fair, with various speakers. But when I reading into it, I wondered how this compared to the previous household scheme, and what the complexity is of obviously the new guidance compared to the old one, because obviously with it only coming out in January and implicating it by April to July, I was thinking to myself, well, that's a short time. And when you think of it, you've got to work with other partnerships as well. The complexity of it, I wondered whether it was doable and achievable. And from a funding point of view, I was thinking, I didn't look the other side of it from the household scheme, but from a funding point of view, is the 9.9 similar to what was previously within the previous schemes, manageable? Was it fully utilised? Is it enough? Is it too much? Because obviously it's rolled over, and then on the third year you get the you get the 11 million. So I was sort of trying to work it out how they compared and whether it was achievable to implicate the new scheme.
Anne-Marie.
So the money is almost the same as it was during the Household Support Fund. The big change is this switch to resilient services and also a switch to a personalised approach. So with the Household Support Fund, we could identify people who may be eligible because of another criteria. So for example, we talked about benefit-related free school meals, and we were able to distribute a large proportion via vouchers automatically to that group. The guidance now is that people need to be individually assessed. So that removes the ability to distribute en masse vouchers to large groups. So that is a big change for us, and of course is more work in terms of processing payments for individuals. Yes, timescales are a really tight challenge for this. The guidance was published in mid-January. So we haven't had a great deal of time, although we've known it's been coming for some time. We haven't had the detail. So we've been working really hard with districts and other partners to pull together what that scheme looks like. We're confident the housing payment element will continue from April, so we won't have a gap there. The difference with the Household Support Fund is that was open to application in tranches, in windows, so it wasn't available all of the time, whereas the Household Support Fund needs to be available all of the time when we open. So it's a challenge at the moment for us to really be clear on what the demand for that might look like. But of course the criteria now have changed in that there must be a financial shock, there must be a change in your circumstance that has led to that, rather than it being a top-up for somebody that perhaps has a regular shortfall in their income. So there is a marked change, so we do expect to see a change in demand along with that as well.
Thank you. You can, Councillor Finn.
Yeah, just on obviously from a crisis, obviously people come to you and go, we need money quick. So how soon a turnaround is that when people really are desperate to justify handing out that money? Like Councillor Collier and Councillor Hill have sort of alluded to, it's people are desperate, but how do you, it sounds awful, but how do you prove that they really are desperate when you want to give them the money, but you can't because you're not sure?
Good question. Anne-Marie.
It's a challenge, isn't it? What we can look at is someone's bank statements. So can we see, is there anything in there that we think really red flags about that? And that's the opportunity then to put people into a resilience service. So if perhaps it looks like they're spending an awful lot of their income each month on their shopping, for example, it might be disproportionate to their household. We can put them into the resilience service to help them for the future. The guidance has quite a quick turnaround as a recommendation in how quickly those payments will be distributed. So that is a factor in just how much pre-work can be done to understand someone's circumstances. But the push then is into the resilience service so they don't need to come back for a crisis payment again in the future.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'll actually go to Councillor Vernon, if that's okay. It's all right. She's right. I'll put her on a hop then.
Thank you. I keep adding parts on. The first thing that I'd like to say, obviously, has been discussed extensively, but I still want to come back to this cash-first approach. I think it's entirely inappropriate, and I think some of the points that we haven't mentioned yet, we're talking about people who are in dire times of need. They could have situations where they're subject to domestic abuse, loan sharks, and I think we need to be really mindful of that. And handing cash over, I really believe, is a really bad idea. I also think as well, and I recognise that this is sort of universally done, bank transfer. Again, we're talking about people who are in significant need and crisis. How do we know that that money's not going to be gobbled up by bank charges or debt payments? And I really feel that we should be looking towards a voucher-based system. Again, I also appreciate, and I think sort of this is a part that's not being touched on, that sort of in the majority of circumstances, these people who are in crisis are absolutely desperate and may be embarrassed and may not wish for others to know that this is the issue. And I think where you've talked about the community coordinating role sort of without repeating the story to multiple services, I think that's a really, really strong point. Sort of for those who are sort of unfortunate and in this position, it's almost heartbreaking, but it is a wider impact. And when you consider children and possibly the need to feed families, this is where I think we have to look again at this, and it can't be a cash first. It's too open to abuse. I also, whilst I take on board Councillor Collier's point about providing receipts, I do think, again, we should allow people some flexibility. And if they're sort of required to provide a receipt for buying a packet of biscuits for the children, I'm not sure. But the level at which a receipt is provided, I think, would perhaps need to be dictated. The other point, sort of logistically, how on earth would cash work? Are you going to have sort of a wad sat in the office for people to come and collect, or sort of literally, how is that logistically going to work? And then my final point, which has also slightly been raised, but again, I'd just like to emphasise a bit further, the timeframes are really, really tight here, and I'm very concerned about the level of detail that's being delegated. Thank you to Councillor Gibson for the offer of it coming back. I think that's really important, but we're talking about a scheme that is going to be being delivered in 6 weeks' time. And quite frankly, there is so much unknown that, again, I have significant concerns about what we're actually delegating authority to do. Even with your report coming back in June, sort of what's going to happen in those 2 months. So those are the points I'd like to make, thank you. But actually, just one final point, sorry, Chairman, with your indulgence. I do think the resilience services and sort of proposing the county-wide service to reduce priority debt and service serious debt is very valuable. People get stuck in debt and they can't get out, and anything we can do to help people in the future get out of that without going down the loan shark route, without going down the ridiculous interest rate route, is to be commended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Isn't it great when we all agree? It's great, isn't it? Councillor Dilks. Until Councillor Dilks came along. Councillor Dilks.
No, I'm in full agreement. I've got to say, I think there is a consensus here. We're all worried about it. I didn't know anything about it until I read it here, and you know, the alarm bells started ringing. I'm a great believer. I think we all are, that people in need, and it can happen to anyone, as Councillor Collier says. You know, that generally they need a hand up, not necessarily a handout. And a handout is cash, to be honest, and that's. Most people in this situation may or may not be the best people to deal with cash, because that's probably why they've got in the problem that they're into in the first place. I've got to, and it's the old saying, isn't it? It's about, you know, if you give a hungry person a fish, you'll feed him for a day. If you give them a fishing rod or teach them how to fish, you'll feed them for life. And I think the fishing rod is the education that kind of goes with it, or that should go with it. Most of my points have also been raised. I'd got the rest questions I'd written down were the break between district and county wasn't entirely clear, but thank you for covering that one. I really do welcome, you know, I think we all do, and we need an urgent report coming back. I almost wonder if there should be a workshop around this. I don't know. I'm just sort of, that's a possibility. And just to, you mentioned the citizens' advice. I'm glad you did, because that was the third point I'd got down, Chairman. In the Deepings, or Deeping St James within my ward, we have a United Charities, and when people are in need, they apply to United Charities. You know, people from many years ago left legacies, and it's built up. It started out in the autumn, it used to be a bucket of coal and a loaf of bread to widows. It's now got a bit wider than that, I'm pleased to say. But I was a trustee, I'm not currently, and we always, when people apply, we always, or United Charities now, always goes to citizens' advice, and we insist that the person who's applying sits down with citizens' advice and goes through all their financial dealings. And at the end of it, they don't normally get cash. That would be a real exception. But they do get the washing machine or the white goods or whatever is required. It makes a big difference. But I've got to say this afternoon I'm be going to South Kesteven District Council, and we are increasing. I'm the cabinet member that covers citizens' advice, and we are increasing for the first time in many, many years the grant to citizens' advice with some of that in mind. In recent years, it hasn't been a very good relationship, I've got to say, and I think we're improving that relationship and making sure there's a closer relationship and less duplication with what the district might do with what citizens' advice do. I stand on that, but I really welcome what you said about that. I'd just say I think we're all really worried about this, and I think it does need to come back with some urgency, to members, if I could say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Martin Samuels.
Thank you, Chair. So I thought it probably worth me stepping into the debate on the basis that the recommendation is that the authority for this scheme be delegated to me in consultation with Councillor Gibson. So a couple of quick points. One, just to express thanks to members for the comments you're making. These are really helpful points which we will need to build in to provide a degree of reassurance. Certainly the crisis element of this, the crisis payment element of this is very similar to the social fund that a number of people may remember. I was actually a social fund officer myself at the start of my career, so I have practical experience of running this kind of scheme. I will draw upon that, but the comments that members have made are really helpful. And worth noting also that in adult social care, of course, we still provide cash payments for some people for who where we manage their finances, and again that is experience that we can draw upon. But I think the comments from members are extremely helpful. I think it absolutely makes sense for us to bring something back to this committee at the earliest point that we can. And I think recognising the points that have been made, that the current report is a bit thin. That is on the basis that we only got the guidance about a month ago. And therefore we are running really fast. I think one final quick point to make, that although in theory this scheme is meant to start on the 1st of April, in practice I think it will take a bit longer. That won't leave a gap in service because it is essentially a new function that is being brought forward. The Household Support Fund has been, as Anne-Marie has very clearly said, has tended to be episodic. Whereas this will be an ongoing scheme. So we do have a little bit of time, so we don't have to have something in place from the 1st of April and be running from then. It will develop over the course of the spring, and therefore that does give us a bit of time to come back to this committee with further details, which I think we will do.
Thank you, Martin. Do you want to come back, Anne-Marie? Or not? It's okay.
Please, Chair. I just wanted to address Councillor Vernon's concern about cash being sort of handed out to individuals. The methods that tend to be used now are cash out vouchers. So people will receive a voucher they take to the post office and then they get the cash over the counter, or they can receive a PIN number by text message. They can go to the cash point, put that in and withdraw the cash. So it doesn't involve councils holding large amounts of cash and handing that over.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. On that note, I don't normally obviously say too much, but having the meeting I had with Sean Johnson was really interesting. One thing I will say about the cash, and this is probably a bit blatantly obvious, in my area I've got a town called Horncastle. They just lost their last bank. It's gone. It's going to go in August. I'm trying to get a banking hub. Not going well. I'll get one somehow, or by crook. But the fact is that if they're giving them cash, one is who are they actually giving that cash to? Because 99% of all transactions are online, on phones, or whatever. But if they get cash that they need to put into a bank to pay a direct debit, there's no banks. So they can't do it. So I would have said that the cash has got to be absolutely last resort. Everybody has bank accounts these days. There's very few people without, and I obviously know that, obviously Martin probably comes from days when people didn't have banks. And in the county, some people still don't, but the majority of people will. So that's something really, really important to bear in mind, that I think, like everybody else here, I don't know how much choice we have on this, but I think cash has to be the absolute last resort, because otherwise there's no money trail whatsoever. I think it's last resort. Anyway, Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions noted down, so just stop me if I ask too many.
Okay. Actually, Councillor French, I'll just throw you out.
Well, I'll stop now then. Yeah, I'm agreeing with everybody in the room that this needs to be for people in need and not for people in want, essentially. And we've got to figure out a way to make sure that happens. The cash last approach also seems a good method as well, for the reasons Councillor Vernon and Hill have mentioned, but also if you take that approach, I feel like you would get a saving in a way which could go to the people who then need it, because if you're not getting cash directly, maybe less people will ask for the money. So you might make a saving as well that way, so there's an upside to that. But it is not a bottomless pit of money, so I'm guessing we have to pick and choose who gets the money, and I'd like to know how are we going to prioritise who gets what, who is the priority. I would probably suggest a Titanic kind of method where women with children come first. And then also what kind of, or what limits are there who can't get any of this money? For example, citizenship would come to mind. So that would be my first question.
Thank you, Councillor French. Anne-Marie.
Okay, so just in reverse order, the fund is only available to people who have recourse to public funds, and that is set out in the guidance. In terms of who could access this is for each local area to shape that. So we are looking at the moment at criteria based on a maximum household income. So that might be different depending on the composition of your household, whether it's single person or family. And we're looking at how we would align those to known limits, so perhaps around universal credit or other established mechanisms for understanding what a low income would look like. And also within that, a look at maximum amount of savings that we might expect someone to have to be able to dip into their savings, perhaps to deal with a crisis, and whether they could do that. So it is within our gift, if you like, as a local authority to shape what that looks like. The guidance doesn't set any categories in that respect.
Councillor French, would you like to come back?
I might have misread the report, but I believe it mentioned claiming benefits as the primary factor, but it also said subtly something like, but not always, something like that.
So that's only for the housing payments. So housing payments are currently in existence. They're transitioning into this scheme, but very much in the same vein that they are now. So to access those, people do need to be on universal credit with a housing element or on housing benefit. The other elements are open to anybody who can demonstrate the low income threshold and crisis.
Would that last point you made be literally anybody, or do you have to be a citizen, for example, of the United Kingdom?
So you need to have recourse to public funds. So you need to have an ability to draw on public funding.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Councillor French, have you finished?
I've got more, but I'll just ask one more.
One more. Let's have one more.
Somebody else can have a go, and I'll come back in a bit. Yeah, and with regards to what you mentioned before, where you're going to look at people's bank statements to determine whether they're going to spend the money wisely, I am quite a cynical person, and I think we're still, even with that method, relying on a bit of honesty, because what if you've got multiple banks? What if you've got family members that you could use? There's ways around it if you're clever, and when it comes to getting money for nothing, people, I fear, will be clever with it. You could, gambling sites won't come up on your bank account if you've used PayPal to pay, for example, or just say PayPal transaction, things like that.
Thank you, Councillor French. It sounds like you've got lots of experience on that side. We won't go there. Anne-Marie.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor French agreed that really is a challenge, and I think it is about being proportionate to the amount of support that is offered. There might be occasions, if we have a bank statement, where we could see that funds were going into another bank account, which might indicate there was another bank account we could ask about, but I think it is about being proportionate.
I mean, actually, I concur on that, because I deal with people's bank statements. I deal with people on benefits, and I have example, because I'm a mortgage broker, so I deal with people's, and I've actually had a recent situation with people doing a right to buy, who both on benefits, £2,500 a month, which they had to get their daughter to go on the mortgage, but he asked me if I wanted £30,000 to put down that he had in his savings account. It goes on big time, and the only way you can do it, as you say, and lenders will follow the money and find out. There needs to be, if people are getting payments, there needs to be, in my opinion, there needs to be something, they need to be told, if it transpires at a later date that they have misinformed us, then we have the right to come back for the funds. It needs to be that case. It's not at the moment, and it needs to be that case. And as I say, it's the same as element that I know loads of cases that people have got money in the bank and they just don't tell the DWP. And they need to follow it through. And I think on the side note, every single person getting money from DWP on benefits should have a full financial review. That's my opinion. One other thing I'll quickly say as well, which it might kill some of your questions, but is that with the conversation I had with Sean, with the Citizen Advice Bureau, they will offer people help. So if they see gambling, they will offer people help. And I think, whether we can do it or not, it should be conditional. Like, obviously, anybody else that might have had a speed awareness course, I'm not asking for anybody to admit it, but it should be conditional that if you're getting this help, there's obviously a problem. They can see that you're paying lots of money, even if it's PayPal. Yeah, lots of gambling. Again, I see it. And they should be conditional, you seek help, because it should be about helping people, not just once, but helping them change their lifestyle. It could be that they're borrowing money from the wrong places, for example. The days of Wonga have completely gone, which are the payday loans, they were completely got rid of, but now people are turning to loan sharks because there's no Wonga. So it's okay to get rid of it, and there are people that do need money. And a lot of it's education. There's no education in schools about how you borrow money or when you should borrow money and how you should do it, unfortunately. And there certainly should be, because the kids go into adults, they don't understand. I've seen lots of horror stories where people have got adverse credit because they didn't know that if they didn't pay their next account, they would get adverse credit, and it needs to be done. So something that Sean told me is that they do, that via the Citizen Advice Bureau, they will have courses available and help to try and get people out of these habits. So it's very important that, and I'm sorry if I've killed some of your questions, but as I say, I had a long conversation with him, it was really good. Anyway, Councillor Brooks.
Sorry, can I just quickly come back, Chair?
You can.
Because it's just clicked in my head what you meant about the recourse for public funds. So that would mean if you've got an indefinite leave to remain, which would give you recourse for public funds, you could get some of this money, which would mean you're not a citizen, but you've worked here for 5 years, and now you can claim benefits and different public funds. Okay, I'd ask the committee if that's
that is correct, well, Councillor French.
If that's
I believe
what the committee
to be the case.
Agrees with, or if we'd like to think about that.
That is, I believe, the case. I go back my experience. I used to deal with doctors and nurses from different countries that used to have a stamp in their passport, no recourse to public funds, which meant they couldn't get child benefit. Without getting political, perhaps we should go back to those days. Anyway, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm the only one on the committee that believes cash is king.
That's because you're from Skegness, Councillor Brooks.
Possibly.
It's in 2Ps though, that's the only problem.
Or it is for me, maybe for me, but others not. As I believe, obviously, cars devalue money, which they do, unfortunately. Regarding the vouchers, when Councillor Vernon brought it up, I was like, that's a great idea, but obviously we do it currently at the minute. I'm assuming we have to pay like a fee for the vouchers, I'm guessing. Also, Councillor Hills mentioned about coming back in June, which I think might be beneficial to have more detail, because I'd like to see the split between crisis payments and resilience and the community coordination. I'd like to see that. So I have full confidence in Martin and Councillor Gibson to look into that. I'm sure we've got robust systems in place for the vouchers to check receipts and everything. Thank you.
Martin.
Yeah, if I can just come back on that. So I think there's been a really interesting debate here and lots of concern about issues. So we've already made a commitment that we'll bring an item back on this when we've got the full scheme. But recognising that there's only a limited amount of time in these formal sessions for a particular item to be discussed. So the thought that we might arrange a separate informal meeting where at an earlier stage where we've got a bit more detail about what this might look like, we can cover the eligibility both in terms of the no recourse to public funds, the definitions there, what we mean by cash first, what the national guidance says, and therefore what our limits are, and then draw on members' views. So to run a workshop earlier in the process, so before we bring something formal back to this committee in sort of May, June time, running something well before that when our thinking is a bit more developed than it is now, but not sort of firmed up completely, so that there is the opportunity for members to influence and guide that thinking. I think we'd be very happy to do that if that was something that members of the committee thought would be helpful.
Thank you, Martin. Jimmy would like to come.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just regarding the vouchers, how quickly do they get presented to somebody in crisis? Because obviously in crisis, you need the money as soon as possible. And obviously if it was on card or bank transfer, it may take a little bit longer. So I'm quite interested in that. Thank you.
Anne-Marie.
So vouchers, like the cash payments, are can be sent by text message or email. So you can have a barcode that you then take into the supermarket. So they don't need to receive a physical gift voucher, if you like. So that can be fairly instant from when that is granted.
Thank you. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to a very valid point that Councillor Vernon made. I don't recall you going back to officers for a response, so I would like an officer response. And interesting to hear that Martin said that he actually has got operational experience of this. It's the element, it's the bit about coercive control. So how do we know if someone is being subjected to financial abuse, and how we're supporting them, and how we ensure that public funds are not supporting that abuse? So when someone comes to us for this much needed support, how do we make sure that they are not being financially abused? And if they are, what do we do? Thank you.
Thank you. A very good question. Anne-Marie?
So each of our district councils that administer this will have safeguarding policies in place. I think it is a challenge, isn't it, to identify and for individuals to speak openly about those sorts of circumstances. We're certainly looking at whether we can have almost trusted referrers, so agencies where they can have a look at the criteria, suggest this person meets that criteria, and then they can access the payment with the district council without having to repeat their story. So that encourages people that they've had their conversation in confidence, perhaps with someone they are working with in that environment, that can then make that recommendation for them. But agree, I don't think there is a 100% fail-safe way if the individual concerned doesn't want to disclose that information. But we can put in place steps where they may have disclosed it in an arena that they feel comfortable with, and then that doesn't need to be passed on again. There can be assurance to the district council that the person is eligible, and that funding then provided in what's the most appropriate way to support them. If cash is an issue because of that, how else might we support them through a voucher or goods in kind?
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Also, I would have thought that if a lady goes to citizen advice, and if they think there's an issue here, then they'd potentially maybe offer some refuge or given the help they need. So, which again, having an independent company dealing with it, I think is actually great. We shouldn't be using the Citizen Advice Bureau as a swap for DWP, but I think having them as independent is great. And I say the more we use them, the better. So,
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Just before you move on, can I just
sorry,
highlight? No, sorry. No, I just want to make the
Yeah.
point, though. You mentioned, obviously, ladies, and I really would like to emphasise in this chamber that domestic abuse and coercive
And
control
men.
does not just apply to ladies. It
I
can be
totally
gentlemen.
agree.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yes. People. Good point. Yeah, people. Anybody who's under a coercive control or whatever. So, but as I say, it goes back to the CAB. So, anyway, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you very much. I want to address a very specific part of the report, which is on page 23, the housing payment element. So it talks about within year 1 and year 2, the funding remaining with the district council. If we're still a county council within year 3, the funding comes to us. It's a really bad idea. And the reason why is that the people that are receiving the housing payment element are already aware to those people working at the district council because they're already in receipt of help, whether it's through the housing benefit, council tax support, they're living in a council rented property. So these people that are vulnerable, that are in crisis, will typically reach out to somebody at the district council that they have a relationship with, because they're the ones that they trust to have that break with. We know that reaching out for help is really hard, so you tend to reach out to people that you trust. All we're doing is adding an extra line of bureaucracy. When I worked in revenues and benefits, if you had a council tax support officer with someone on the phone that was really vulnerable, really struggling, they could often do all of that job. They would help them from their side. They'd walk upstairs, they'd speak to revenues and benefits, they'd see what we could do from that side, they'd sort the housing payment element out for them. All we're doing is we're adding in another line of bureaucracy for these vulnerable people, delaying the process. It's better off remaining with the district council, because they're the ones that have them often at that initial point where they need the help. So it's just going to delay the help and the process for those people.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
So it's set down in the guidance that is what will happen. The funding will come to the county council. I think that if, as we work through and we know what the future of LGR is, potentially in the future there is nothing stopping the county council, if unitary didn't happen, to passport that money through to districts to continue as they are now. That would be a perfectly reasonable choice. But the guidance doesn't cover those scenarios as yet. At the moment, it's working on the basis that this is a scenario we have. But yes, I'm sure that there's a way that could come as an option.
It's just that having that initial point of contact where you have a vulnerable person, they're on the phone to you, if everything's within the district council, they can help that person when they are on the phone. They can offer them some reassurance and the help they need. If it's a case of, oh, well, I need to speak to somebody at LCC about that, you know, but when they're going to go back to that person, you're adding potentially 24, 48 hours of not helping somebody that may be genuinely, desperately in need of help. It doesn't really benefit anybody by adding another line of bureaucracy into that at that point. So I think it'd be really beneficial if it's all kept within one, so the person on the phone can help that person. Thank
you, Kane. Councillor Collier, I hadn't forgotten.
I use this microphone so I don't get so tangled up. I'm still concerned about the abuse of the whole system of benefits anyway. Through my church work, not so long ago, I was asked to help a couple with their budgeting, and I asked them to be completely honest with me, which I felt that they perhaps were, but I was absolutely horrified that they had far more income coming in than what my husband and I did, who always worked, and I just was floored by it, you know, to see how much it was mismanagement of their money. So I do agree that, you know, more education needs to be put into schools with teaching our youngsters right from small about the value of money and how to use it. Because that's what they needed. They were asking for a handout from our church, which we would give if needed. But in this case, it was just, you know, you're mismanaging this money. Look at it and think again what you're spending it on. You know, a load of junk. They had nothing to show for it. I don't know where it was going.
It goes to priorities. Again, when I see people's bank statements and they say they've got no money and they're spending £200, £250 a month on Deliveroo, you know, it's gobsmacking really that people have got no idea how to deal with money, how to save money. Nobody's got any savings. Nobody's got any savings to actually give the resilience, and because sometimes they may think it's all right, the state will look after me, so I ain't got to worry about it. I've gone off on one here. Nobody's got any income protection in case they are off ill at any point. People are living on the edge all the time, and they do need some help and guidance. And as I say, as I said to Sean the other day, it's so important that when people actually have a problem, you look at the problem, you look at the bank statements, and they get the help they need. Isn't the money or whatever, but I can see you might have a budgeting issue here. I mean, we hear about nurses going to food banks, and we go expect to nurses that if they're going to food banks, there's another issue behind the scenes that's causing you to go to a food bank all the time. You get paid, probably not as much as we all think they should get paid, but you get paid a wage, and there's this issue, and a lot of it is down to education. So, and I said to Sean, I think this is something that's part of it, is that it should be, yes, we'll help you, but you have to go on this course. We want to do this because we want to make sure that you come out of it at the end and you don't have to keep coming back. And by doing that, an education is going to mean that less people will come back, hopefully. So, on my soapbox again. Right, have we got any other? We have. Councillor French with other questions.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a query as well because it talks about you can use it to pay off debt and housing. So if you've got a council tax debt, or you need the money to pay for council tax, and we give them the money to pay for that, have we not just washed the money, essentially, the ring-fenced money that's supposed to be used for helping people? That was just something that popped up. And then the way it's split between the districts, it says split between districts weighted by population. I would go as far to say that the amount of people you live near is not necessarily an indicator of how much money or how much help you would need. Take Boston, for example, where it's very deprived. It's one of the most deprived places in the country, and it's not exactly a population centre compared to Lincoln. And then, of course, you've got Lincoln, which will have a large student population come and go, which will change things and open up more purses for that area just because of the student population. And I'd probably go as far to say that probably every student in the country almost would be eligible for something like this as well. And I'm not sure that's in the spirit of the scheme. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor French. Anne-Marie?
So in terms of what would be considered priority debt, it's for us to decide for the scheme what would be a priority debt and what wouldn't. Yes, you're right in that a council tax debt could in effect be money going out to come back in again. There's something also around, is that debt something that's built up over a number of months rather than it being a crisis that has created that debt. So it is something to carefully look at in terms of what is priority debt. In terms of how the funding is split between the districts, although it is by population, it is also based on the indices of multiple deprivation. So that works out which areas have people that are in receipt of more benefit, have higher levels of unemployment. So the idea would be that it would be weighted by population. So you would see the likes of East Lindsey, for example, would receive a higher proportion of the allocation than perhaps North or South Kesteven would, based on levels of deprivation.
That's Anne. Councillor Vernon?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, and thank you for your indulgence in allowing me to come back. It's right that we scrutinise this extensively, and I think that we all have done exactly that. But I would like to make the point that we really must be aware that the majority of people who need to access this scheme are genuinely in need. They may be embarrassed, they may feel upset, and I fear that we shouldn't make this process frightening. We should ensure it's robust and that we offer appropriate checks. But those that are in need should not be frightened to come forward and access this fund as necessary, and they should feel comfortable reaching out.
Hear, hear. I think our worry about obviously fraud is on the basis of not seeing the fund disappear off into the distance, to make sure that the people that do need the help get it, and we've got loads of more funds in there to actually help more and more people. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. This will be my last question. It's the crisis thing. Councillor Vernon's right. People don't like going and asking for help. It's as simple as that. I went to a food bank the other day to talk to them about it, and that's the hardest thing, for somebody to come and ask for help, especially when it's men who are looking after children and that separated. For them to go there, it's near enough impossible. But my question is regarding the crisis payment application process. Will it be the same, or is it harder to apply for it under this new system? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Good question. Anne-Marie.
When you say apply, do you mean the criteria? The criteria. So it is different to the Household Support Fund in that there has to be this financial shock element. So it won't be harder to apply, but the criteria will be different, and they will be more focused on the shock rather than an ongoing shortfall in income, which is what we would see in people in household support. They would come back round after round because they had a shortfall in their income that they just weren't able to make up.
Thank you. Any further questions? Blimey. Councillor Gibson.
If you're coming towards the end, Chair, I wouldn't mind just adding a couple of comments, if that's okay. Just to say thank you very much for the comments from everybody. This is being worked on, so the comments received today are more than welcome. As Councillor Vernon just said, the vast majority of people that will need or have a need probably won't want to abuse the system, won't want cigarettes, drugs or alcohol. However, we do need to be careful with this money and make sure it is spent in the correct way. Having just worked in drug and alcohol services myself for 10 years, there is another element to this as well, that if you do give somebody cash that has a drug issue, if you give them 100 quid, that's 10 bags of heroin, and they'll take it straight away potentially, and you could have a death on your hands. So cash can be dangerous for people with those sort of addictions, and we need to be aware and safeguard for them as well. A voucher-based system was a preference of mine, was something we spoke about, and it is something that officers are looking into, and hopefully that comes through in the detail. The details are being worked through. When I say cash isn't best, part of this scheme could pay for repairs to your vehicle if you've broken down so you can get to work. Most garages probably don't accept Tesco vouchers, so we need to have that cash option, I guess, is why that is part of it. As mentioned, the scheme will be starting before the details are finalised. We don't want to leave a gap where people are left with no funds, so that is the reason for starting it before the details are totally nailed down. Hopefully we're leaving ourselves enough time to narrow the details down and make this solid so it can't be abused. And if the subcommittee, Councillor Dilks, or the extra meeting can help towards that, then that would be more than welcome, and everybody's input would be absolutely welcome. And just lastly, on any hidden abuse, I think for me, multi-agency working with this is paramount. The way in which you find people that are hiding abuse is by all agencies talking together, and you find out where there are some gaps, and you can gently try and work with those people to try and assist and help to make sure it doesn't continue. So just want to say thank you for the comments and to add those to it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Fantastic. Thanks, Anne-Marie and Martin. I think we might have finished. What we're going to do, we're going to take a 10-minute break because we've gone on a little bit longer, like we should do. That's what we're here for. It's totally great. So we'll reconvene at 11:30. Oh, we have to vote, don't we? We need to vote for go for a wee these days. Hands up all those who wish to take a break. Hands up against. Any abstentions? Oh, sorry, we're going to vote on the item as well, actually. I think my bladder's calling me, yes. Not on that. Yes, all those in favour in passing our comments to the executive? All those against? Any abstentions? Excellent. Well, we'll come back at 11:30. Thank you very much. Brooks isn't back yet. Let's start without him. He's not used to being in the chamber. He's been thrown out. Now he's coming. He's coming. You're barred for being late. We waited for you, Councillor Dilks. Okay, I hope everybody's refreshed. Right, on to item 8, the review of the financial performance 2025-26 quarter 3. This pre-decision scrutiny report, which can be found on pages 135 to 142 of the agenda pack, outlines the Council's financial performance at the quarter 3 for 25-26, covering both revenue, capital budgets. The report is due for consideration by the Executive on the 3rd of March 2026. The views of the Board will be reported back to the Executive ahead of its meeting. The report will be presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer, who is supported by colleagues from the Finance team. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. So this is part of our normal quarterly reporting, and the report that you've got in front of you is our report to the Executive for the 3rd of March that will look at the quarter 3 for the current financial year. The report provides a forecast at quarter 3 of our expected revenue and capital spend against the budgets approved for the current financial year based on current activity and expected activity. The appendices of the report also provide update on our reserves position, including the use of the Development Fund, and an update to our Treasury position, including investment performance on our cash balances and our forecast borrowing requirement. In terms of our revenue position, so Table 1 on page 35 shows a forecast underspend of £6 million over our general fund services. This is a small movement from the quarter 2 position, and the service budget lines have improved following the movement of budgets that were approved at the Executive in quarter 2. The main focus of the pressures and variances are continuing on from those previously reported. For example, challenges on the social care placements, waste income and transport. The recommendations in the report for the Executive seek approval for them to approve the movement of reserves to mitigate and offset some of the pressures in children's services, and we consider that those pressures have now been accounted for when we've set the budget for 26/7 but need some support during the current financial year. Table 1 also highlights the continued forecasting of an overspend on the dedicated schools grant, which has risen to 30 million, driven by pressures on the high needs block. This position will be ring-fenced as a deficit position as the government implements its statutory override, but obviously members will be aware that the movement of that has now been announced as part of the settlement, and the SEND reforms have now been launched to deal with some of those problems. In terms of the capital budget, Table 2 provides an update on our capital programme, which has a current plan of 275 million for investment in our assets in the current year. The table also sets out the external funding and borrowing requirements against that programme. The overall spend forecast shows an underspending of 44 million this year, which will include the contingency, and with the exception of the contingency, this will relate to timing of programme delivery, and future years show current pressures in there which have again been dealt with through the budget setting process. That's a short oversight. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. Out to the members. Let's start off with Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the underspend of 6.025 million at quarter 3, is that mainly cautious budget setting or genuinely efficiencies and better value? And can you confirm service delivery has been fine and not been changed? Thank you.
So we report in the report you'll see an update on things like the savings delivery through the year, and they're all on track to be delivered. So any efficiencies that were built into the budget for the current year have all been delivered, and that will have been reflected in the service delivery that we're currently receiving. The 6 million is more to do with the contingency underspend. So we've got some overspends on the service lines, but you'll see that we've got a contingency that we keep in place to deal with shocks during the year, and we've got an overall position there that's allowing us to show that 6 million underspend. I think the other area of small change in the funding through business rates income as well. So that is predominantly to do with the contingency that we build in as part of our prudent budgeting.
Thank you, Michelle. Jimmy, would you like to come back?
Yes, please, Chair. It's a 6 million underspend, which is a lot, and then obviously you've got a 29 million overspend, which is a lot as well. So are you tweaking your system to try and level that out in future years?
So the 29 million is purely around the dedicated schools grant, and that is a ring-fenced budget. So we're not allowed to take money in or take money out of that, and that's been a requirement of the grant for a number of years. I think that the fact that we're probably at the very tail end of local authorities that have been reporting a deficit position on the dedicated schools grant because of all the mitigations and measures we've put in place. And as part of the settlement, the government announced how it's dealing with this deficit position in terms of the SEND reforms. So I think given the percentage that the 6 million represents, it's not a massive percentage in our overall budget, and we would always look to be, making sure the service budgets represent what they need to deliver the services that they need, but we will always need some contingency in place to deal with shocks during the year, which, as you can see, we have had some through the year. But just to make the point that the DSG, the schools grant, is ring-fenced and we can't subsidise it through the general fund.
Thank you, Michelle. Any further questions? Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Yeah, I think service budgets are actually overspending at the moment. Has come down a lot, which is good news. So it is a lot better. I mean, can I just clump children's services into a package, or I can keep coming back? It's up to you. But
clump away, Councillor Hill.
Yeah. So I mean, I've got a few other things, but right. In terms of, I say in the recommendation, 1.5 million from Public Health Reserve to children's. That will be in addition to the 1.1 million, which will be forthcoming from the demise of the independent living service. And obviously, as has been stated, they are currently projecting a 5 million overspend, which is getting worse. I think there's two things I'd like to say, and also there's an explanation as why the school placement is in capital is largely underspent. So does that mean, the question I suppose is, shouldn't we actually be building these school places rather than hoarding them? But I just would like an explanation as why we're not spending on that capital project. But there's two comments I'd like to make. One is a question: could we have an explanation as how obviously the high needs block and the writing off of the money, which is good news, but infuriating that others who haven't been as as prudent as we've been, they get massive amounts written off, and we'll get some. So just to explain how the 10% how it worked for us, what effect that will have on the children's services revenue budget. And I have to say, there's a huge amount of money gone into children's services. And I remain to be convinced that this budget is under control. I understand that there are a lot of pressures, which we all know about, but you just feel that all the time this budget is getting worse and is more and more overspends. And then despite the extra money being put in, more and more overspends keep carrying on. So I just wonder, in terms of, I know that Children's Scrutiny will look at the service delivery, but in terms of trying to get this budget under some sort of control, what is the role of this committee, and is it appropriate for this committee to have some detail to give us some confidence that children's services are in fact on top of their budget? Because bluntly, I remain to be convinced. So there's some questions and comments in there, Chairman. I have got some other stuff, but
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Yes, we'll go on to those. Michelle.
So I'll start, and I might need to pass over to Martin to answer some of the children's things. So in terms of the use of the 1.5 million, that's an in-year reflection of the overspends in children's services. So that's obviously the budget use that's been discussed through the budget setting processes for 26/7 and future years, but dealing with a similar situation. In terms of the capital programme and basic need, if members aren't aware, we get allocated basic need, very much formulaic, and then the officers and the executive decide how to best apply that grant. So it's not used often in the year that we receive it. It's used when the needs are identified, relating to specific need in different schools around their year group and their future year group needs. So I probably didn't describe that very well. I'm sure Martin could do a much better job of that than me. In terms of the deficit position, so what was announced by government was recognising that most, if not all, education authorities have got a deficit on the high needs block for within the DSG. The promise is that if we create and implement a SEND reform plan, that we will be eligible for up to 90% reimbursement of the deficit that we are currently carrying for 25-6 and 6-7, and that will be dealt with through a grant. I think the key point there is it's up to 90%. Up to now, the government have allowed us to kind of park it on our balance sheet as a deficit, as other authorities have. At the point where that finishes and those grants are given, we will need to deal with the potentially 10% deficit. And we'll need to do that through allocation of reserves or whatever's appropriate at that time. I'm sure Martin can probably do a much better job of describing the SEND situation and the children's placement. I think just to say as well, Heather did give quite a detailed response around the pressures that have been built into the children's social care budget for 26-7 when it came to OSMB in January. So hopefully that was helpful as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Back to Martin. Sorry, sorry, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of the capital programmes, obviously we shared previously around the Better Belonging strategy and the works around expansion of special schools and the individual programmes around mainstream hubs and AP hubs, just to reassure OSMB that there is a good level of interest in those opportunities for schools to open those provisions. In terms of the capital spend, the navigation of decision making on each scheme has taken slightly longer, depending on whether it's an academy or in a maintained school, but also getting trustee approval from some of the multi-academy trusts. So that has meant that before design works have been commenced and committed to, we've not progressed them until they've absolutely signed up to doing it. That therefore pushes the timeline for implementation further along in terms of the capital commitment. Obviously, one of the capital commitments that's taken a slight change more recently was the news that the free school wouldn't go ahead that had been originally agreed by the DFE, but because it hadn't got through the trust designation process, that they had reverted back to providing additional capital allocations for us to use locally to fund some of those solutions. So I think we've got an additional 33 hubs coming online. What I would also say is the white paper that was mentioned in the pack today, that was released on Monday. A lot of information within that we would also need to consider as a SEND partnership of how to dovetail that through, subject to it being agreed moving forward. Just to be kind of clear for OSMB and noting the deficit in Lincolnshire, we're one of the few remaining authorities that doesn't have a structural deficit registered. We do now. But the forecast for those deficits are 6.6 billion as a country next financial year, just on the high needs block. And if you read, I think it's in the later part of the white paper for SEND, there is a forecast that shows that it will get significantly higher before it gets better, as it were, in terms of sustainability and functionality. What I will also share with the committee, and I think I spoke last time, is since the notion of a white paper being published, we have seen increased anxieties in families and communities around their children and young people. That has played out to a sustained and significant increase in the SEND system, which has surpassed all of the trajectories that we'd done in the previous years and the additional capacity that we added. One thing I would say as well is that the headline figure of the 30 million is there's a lot of complexity within that, and there is actually some real positives.
So there's a line within that explanation that talks about mainstream school top-up funding. That's indicative of mainstream schools holding on and working with children in those settings, and that is much more cost effective than, and also better for the children in terms of where they belong, in terms of where they play through to. So if all of those mitigations hadn't taken place, the sustainability would have been much, much worse, as is recognised, hence the need for the white paper. So I hope I covered off some of those questions. Councillor Hill.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. Just so the when we get the grant to cover our 30 million or 28 million or whatever it is, that will then release that money back for we can use it as a council as we see fit. Is that correct?
So it'll just be replacing the cash that's been going out effectively and impacting our cash balances and bring that deficit back down.
Thank you. In terms of, I see that public health is due for an underspend, according to the figures here, quite a large underspend. So I suppose the question is then back to independent living service. Why are we, and I know we heard at the council that is carrying on, but I just, some thoughts as this underspend is happening. It is ring-fenced money. Any explanation or thoughts about what else we could be using that underspend on?
Just if I can just come in first, I know one of the key things that we are working through at the minute is with the grant simplification, which is a lovely term that the government introduced as part of the settlement. There's been extra conditions kind of built around the public health grant that we're working through at the moment. So hopefully, I'm sure Martin can maybe touch on that as well as whatever he was going to say.
Well,
that's okay.
I suppose Martin, in the last meeting, said, well, this is all for, we're going to use this for technology, but I don't see much of it being used for technology at the moment, bluntly.
So if I can come in there. So we have for some years been in a position where during the course of each year we've been forecasting an underspend on the public health grant, and then at the end of the year we have used that money for relevant expenditure that had already been being incurred within adult social care, and that has generally been the technology enabled care team. So in effect I have a team of staff who are working full-time on technology enabled care. We essentially use them as we expect they will be funded through the public health grant at the end of the year, but we don't charge them to the public health grant until the end of the year, which effectively gives us a degree of flexibility in the use of the grant during the course of the year. So I think this is a position where, as in most years, at this stage it looks like the public health grant is looking for an underspend. In practice, at the end of the year, that figure will revert to a nil, because the team in adult social care that is working on technology enabled care, which is a absolutely justifiable call on the public health grant, will then be charged to that grant. And it's really just a way of presenting it from an accounting perspective. As Michelle has pointed out, there have now been some quite significant changes in the grant conditions to the public health grant. I mean, that will primarily kick in for next year, but it is having a number of implications for this year. And in particular, the three main things that have been brought in. One is that a number of grants related to smoking cessation are being rolled into the core public health grant. So rather than us having the public health grant and then in addition a smoking cessation grant, all will be in one. But DHSC has imposed a ring fence within the ring fence, so that the amount that the council currently spends on smoking cessation plus the amount of the grants that are being rolled in will continue to have to be spent on smoking cessation. And we've just recently, in going through the details, spotted that they've done the same thing for substance misuse. So again, there are a number of grants that have been separate grants for substance misuse. Those are being rolled into the main public health grant, but a sub-ring fence being introduced, so that in order that the council will be required to continue to spend both the amount of the grants that are being rolled into the public health grant and our existing spend on substance misuse, that figure will need to be maintained. And then the third area is that the DHSC has become much more active in their position that public health grant cannot be used for things which councils have been already spending from the general fund. So the technical term is substitution. DHSC has, for a number of years, it's been something that you're not supposed to do, but they've not been terribly active in it. It has become clear that DHSC is now being active on that, and it's worth noting there was a recent report that I think it was Barking and Dagenham were found through an internal audit to have been spending £1.8 million of public health grant on things that should have been funded by the general fund, and DHSC has therefore reduced their grant for next year by £1.8 million to effectively force them to repay that funding. So quite a lot of changes, and we are working through that process at the moment to see quite what that means for Lincolnshire.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Hill, would you like to come back, or are you okay?
Place, there's some issues. I note that there is currently capital quite 11 million projected underspend in place, which obviously includes mostly things like roads. So just like an explanation why that capital underspend is projected. Also a projected underspend of, I think, £4 million on revenue for highways. I mean, we've had that debate before, but again, some thoughts as to if that underspend does continue, which it probably will to the end of the year, where that could go. Because, I mean, I think there are many of us think that underspend perhaps should go to highways maintenance, not be siphoned off elsewhere. One of the reasons given was potential winter maintenance overspend. I know we've got another month left of this financial year. We could get snow all for all March, but I wonder if Nicole, bouncing on her a bit here, are highways anticipating a underspend or overspend on winter maintenance? So it's just on that place. There seems to be a lot of underspends, and wonder, why that is, and B, what's going to be done, what's their thoughts about where it might be spent.
Thank you, Councillor Hill.
So I'll start, maybe Nicole can help. So in terms of the capital, I think the table on page 65 shows the variances. I think, as you say, a lot of it is timing, but there's things like the household waste recycling centre in Skegness. Decision was made to reprioritise that as part of the budget work. I don't see anything specifically. There's pressures as well as underspends there in some of the major road schemes. So unless there was something specific that you wanted a response on, I think that...
Page 56, highways, 3.2 million underspend.
Page 56. So that's the revenue, yeah? Yeah. So a big part of the underspend is relating to TROs, I believe, and that's been dealt with.
It's not the. I think it's quite clear why the underspend is going, but there'll be, by now there must be thoughts as to what to do with that underspend. I know we have a debate at the end, but I'm asking within what areas there could be, and I suspect winter maintenance won't overspend because October it's been, apart from some weeks, quite a mild winter.
So the financial regulations set out how underspends are dealt with at the end of the year. So 1%, up to 1% for each exec director area will be carried forward automatically, which is part of the regulations, and then any balances beyond that come forward through executive to council to decide in September about how any of those balances are used. So that's a constitutional requirement for dealing with the balances at year end, which say come back to the chamber in September about how those get dealt with. The winter maintenance, I think it says in the report we forecast on a number of gritting rungs during the year. That's dealt with through the year, and obviously some overspends there, offsetting underspends elsewhere on things like staff. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that, Nicole?
No, I don't think there's anything else to add to that, no.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Just
Councillor?
one on...
I can see you.
Sorry. Governance, I think on one paper, I think it's revenue, there is a bit of a variation in spend there. I think it's in the detail. Can somebody explain what that's all about?
Happy to come in there.
Andrew.
Thank you for the question. So within the legal services at the moment, struggling to recruit due to a competitive labour market. So a lot of the significant costs that we're showing in there is down to locum costs within the service. So we're currently reviewing it with the look to drafting proposals for a new service delivery model to be implemented in the new financial year, and working with finance colleagues over this period has identified, I suppose, a more accurate reflection. So where it's adjusted from Q2 to Q3, we feel this gives an accurate reflection of the increased costs that are reported.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, let's move on to Councillor Beecham.
Thank you, Chairman. I've noticed that several demand-led areas, such as children in care specialist placements, adult social care packages and temporary residential care, are reporting significant overspends driven primarily by complexity and volume. How are we using this in-year data to adjust the medium-term financial planning and transformation programs so that the service demand and cost growth don't outpace the Council's ability to resource statutory duties over the next 2-3 years?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. So as part of the budget setting process that was here in the Chamber on Friday, you'll recall that there was £85 million worth of cost pressures, which was a significantly larger figure than we'd anticipated it to be the prior year when we'd forecast forward. That's reflective of those pressures, so reflective of the pressures of cost increases due to prices and demand increases in areas such as adult social care and children's social care placements. So we believe the budget that we've set reflects the demand that we're seeing during the year, and we've got statements from the exec directors to say that they're happy that that demand is being reflected in the budgets we've set so that we can work within that. We do still, of course, hold reserves and contingencies to deal with shocks in year if we do have them, and also we have programmes in place specifically around adults and children's to look at the demand and the demand management and the alternative ways of dealing with that. I don't know if the Martins might want to comment on any of that, but...
Shall I go first?
Yes, Martin, thank you.
A brace of Martins. So just to expand a bit upon what Michelle's said from an adult social care perspective, so members will be aware in the budget that you approved on Friday, there's an increase of £36 million in the adult social care budget for next year. That is divided almost equally between inflation prices, national living wage and the like, and national living wage is actually much more important in the adult social care world than inflation is, because most of the staff in adult social care are paid at the national living wage, so that's the key driver. But it's divided about equally between those price increases and the increases in to reflect demand, so about 18 or 19 million pounds on that area. Again, members of the committee will be aware that the executive recently signed off a new adult social care strategy, which is fundamentally based on the principle of maximising people's independence so that they don't go on to develop the needs which cause them to need formal care, and therefore that protects the budget of the council, and that is supported by our new target operating model, which very much places the emphasis on working with people at an early stage so that they are we enable them, as I say, to not develop the need in the first place. I have an extensive adults improvement programme in place, which is looking service by service, area by area, looking both to strengthen our processes to ensure that we are really getting good value for money. So we're looking at how we work with providers. Of course, all adult social care in Lincolnshire is delivered by external providers. The council is not a provider of any formal care. So looking at how we work with providers, how we work with the market, how we work with the NHS, and then also looking at our social work practice and occupational therapy practice to make sure that this really is person-centred, strength-based, and has that philosophy of maximising independence at the heart of it. It's worth saying that we are seeing significant impact of that programme. We started the programme towards the beginning of the current financial year. We have already seen in the region of £6 million worth of savings in that area. We can get into the issue, is that cost reduction or cost avoidance? I've several times had this conversation with Michelle. If we end up spending less than it says in the budget, then it's a saving. And on that basis, we believe we've made getting on for £6 million of savings already in this current financial year from a programme that started at the beginning of the year. We are forecasting significant further savings during next year. I think we've taken a prudent approach so that we have robust estimates of what we think future demand will look like. We have then made a prudent assessment of what we think the impact of our cost avoidance activity will be, and therefore built that into the budget. But we work on the basis that it's better to overachieve than underachieve, and therefore the budget has set at a prudent level. So we are confident that overall across the adult care and community wellbeing budget, I'm confident of coming in on budget both this year and next year, and indeed through the MTFP period.
Thank you, Martin. Martin Smith, would you like to?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Beecham. In terms of the AP and SEND space, that high needs space really, in summary, we've done a lot of work around capturing data and reporting data from separate spreadsheets or reports. We've now got a Power BI dashboard that pulls in all of the data feeds, so we can monitor on a monthly and a quarterly basis what requests to assessments for EHCPs are, permanent exclusions, suspensions, quality of decision making, timeliness, thresholds. We've got all of that data set. We've also flipped that round to inform our trajectories and our sufficiency demands. Obviously, data is really helpful, but in the high needs space, what we've seen, because it's that 0 to 25 age group, what we've seen is even with really good quality data, if you draw a line and you think, we're fairly certain that's going to be the demand now, and then externally something happens and the demand goes up, it always looks like the mitigations are not having the impact necessarily. We're confident that the mitigations are having an impact, things like our quality and effectiveness advisors and the work of our workforce development platform. We can see that's making a difference, but overall demand overshadows that. It has been used to formulate our sufficiency strategy around where mainstream hubs appear or where AP hubs appear, so that they're in the right place, and it supports the costs to the council around transportation as well. We do factor that in. I think one of the hard things just to share with OSMB is to forecast the end of the story, because in the SEND system there are a number of routes you end up going down, and linking a financial amount to that is more than a average cost is really difficult. So if you end up in an EOTAS package or on Section 19 tuition or a special school placement, if you're in a special school you might be on 6 different bands. If you're in the INMS system, it's an open competitive tendering market. One provider might charge 55,000, another provider might charge 88,000. So what we use for our forecasting is averages from what we can see. That makes it variable in terms of forecast, because it depends where those journeys go. But we try and mitigate and manage that through our quarterly reporting. The one thing I will just mention around for OSMB's benefit, around the transformation and the reform of the SEND system, in the next financial year it will be particularly difficult, because the next financial year's high needs block in essence is cash flat, because they're anticipating all of the reforms coming around and making some kind of change to the system. If that change doesn't occur, it will actually appear on the face of it like the overspend is accelerating even further. if that makes sense. I hope it made sense in a financial way, Michelle. But I just wanted to kind of set that scene for the group today.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Dilks.
Thanks, Chairman. I've got two questions. First one's about highways, and I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Crofts for sending us the list of projects that have been deferred from the current year to next year and beyond. And as I gather, that was in response to a request that was made in November at OSMB, and I think it was a reminder came at the last meeting. So thank you for that. However, what came was just the list of items that have been deferred from this year. I thought that what had been asked for was a list of all items that have been bumped, not just from this year, but from next year to future years. And certainly that affects me in my division. So, you know, can I ask for an update on that, please? You know, it's not just this year's ones that there was a list of, or there is a list of. It's all projects, and the costings for each would be helpful. Do you want to deal with that and then do my second, or do you want me to go on? I don't mind.
No, you find Councillor Dilks, get on to
okay.
That's fine. No,
my main one is on the mitigation for the 5 million overspending, children's services, and the recommendation to move 1.5 million from the public health grant from government. I really hear what Martin says, and thank you for that, Martin. But I really do seek assurance and confidence that it is sort of legal, and we're not going to do a barking and Dagenham, I think you said. You know, how does Children's Services meet the criteria, or the ring fence within the ring fence, or whatever it is, to be spent with public health money? I just don't get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
So there are a number of aspects of children's services that are well within the scope of the ring fence. So there's no issue about that. Obviously, children's services are responsible for the children's public health service. So what used to be school nursing and health visiting, those are public health funded services. But there are a range of things that are absolutely focused on improving the well-being of children and families, and therefore no issue about those being within the ring fence at all. We are having informal conversations with the Regional Director of Public Health to just check that we don't get tripped up by the substitution point. So while this report seeks the approval for that transfer, we will just be checking with the RDPH that there won't be a problem from that perspective. That hasn't been completed, and it will only be an informal process, and the RDPH won't say anything formally, but it will give us a good sense. But Kennedy, this wouldn't have come forward to this stage if we weren't confident that it would be possible.
No, thank you. I'm just seeking assurance as a councillor. Thank you. It's possible that we might not be able to do this 1.5 million environment next year because of the changes that they're doing. I'll just complete, if I may. Sorry, Martin, if you want to answer.
So we're having the conversations with the RDPH just to check that there isn't a problem. So that hasn't been finalised yet. But so we are expecting that it shouldn't be a problem, but we're just checking that will be okay.
Thank you for that. If I may just finally come back. In the budget, under the ILS service, we looked into or approved, the council did the a new service for children's weight loss, as I understand it. Are we expecting that to be funded from the public health grant?
So again, just to be clear on that position, so what the exec has agreed is that the current ILS will continue for the whole of the next financial year, 26/7. That from the beginning of the 27/8. Yeah, I've got my years right. From the beginning of the 27/8 year, there will be a standalone smoking cessation service, and that funding released from the ILS would be used to support the existing Best Start Lincolnshire service, which has a range of wellbeing consequences from it. Again, one of the issues we're having conversations with the RDPH about is to ensure that that doesn't get caught by the substitution point. So it's not a new service that would be commissioned. One of the issues we'll be looking at is whether we would need to work with children's colleagues to redesign the existing Best Start Lincolnshire service so that it was more explicitly focused on well-being, and that therefore that wasn't an issue. But as I say, at the moment we don't think there'll be an issue, but we are having that conversation just to make sure that there isn't a problem.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. If I may come back on, I just wondered on the highways one, if I could get an
That's
answer.
fine. No, we've got a lot to cover on the budget, so I'm happy to have extra questions. That's fine.
Can I come back on the highways question?
Sorry,
Okay.
Michelle. Yeah.
So I'm going to answer the question. So the report reported, the finance report reported in Q2 and Q3 that due to the drought damage and the reactive maintenance overspend, that there was a number of planned programme works that had been deferred, and that was part of the email that was sent round by Tom of what's been deferred during the current year. I'm not aware that anything's been deferred in future years. Nothing's certainly not been reported in future years.
I think the point, Councillor Dill, when you push something back, everything gets pushed back. That's the point.
Yeah. And I don't know what programme's been shared for future years yet. That will be part of the Highways Asset Management Strategy that will go to Highways Scrutiny. I'm not sure what the timeline is for that, but that will be part of the scrutiny process for the strategy going into Highways.
I believe that's imminently. I think it might be April.
Mr. Chairman, I have been assured by an officer that a scheme I was expecting to come in my division next year has been bumped to the following year, to 27/28. I think I'm right in that. I've got an email if necessary. So I'm sure I wasn't the only one that... yeah, so I really would ask for that list.
I think if we ask Tom, if he could just check into that, and if so, provide us a new list of any of the ones that may have been pushed forward. Sorry, Nicole. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if it could be clarified exactly what was asked for and exactly what is needed, and I will endeavour to take that back.
Thank you, Nicole. I believe so, unless I'm mistaken, is a list of all the works and when they're likely to be. So a plan forward. I'm not sure how forward you can replan stuff, but if we have got that, that'd be great.
Together with costings or expected today's costings, that would be helpful.
If we could do that, Nicole, that'd be fantastic. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you. Chairman, I have got some other points, but just on this specific point, I completely agree with Councillor Dilks. The wording in the report and the question I've got to ask is what projects specifically have been reprogrammed and what projects have been reprioritised, which areas of work, because it says clearly in this report, reprioritised areas of work for the remainder of the year. So there clearly is an impact on the work that's planned for this year. So I'd be very keen to see those figures. And whilst I'm not normally a member of this, please could I be sent it as well?
I believe that was the information that Tom sent out because this was within the Q2 report as well. So that was a request from Q2. I believe that's the information that Tom's sent to all members of the board, I think.
Thank you. So, yeah, obviously if Nicole can provide us the information as soon as you have it, that would be fantastic. Right. Councillor Hill.
It's quite simple. There is a forward programme which Highways have got, which goes years in advance. So all that will happen is, I mean, hopefully common sense will prevail and they've got the underspend and this debate will become entirely academic because they'll use the underspend to reinstate those programmes which have been cut out. But the whole thing just shoves down. So they have a long list of schemes, planned schemes. So it should be a quick job just to get that down and see. But hopefully the underspend will be dealt with as at the end of the year. So the problem with the drought will be dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's not just that the whole programme sort of moved down a bit. Several, at least in my division, 2 schemes have been switched round, in years. And, the email I've got says the original plan had been to deliver works on Bridge Street ahead of Holfleet Church Street scheme. However, due to current budget pressures and the recent need to prioritise, a number of resurfacing sites have had to be reprioritised. And so Halfleet Church Street will now be delivered 26-27, while Bridge Street has been moved back 27-28. Can you see what I'm saying? They've been moved. It isn't just everything's moved back a year. It's that some have switched round. I'd just like to know, confirmation of when to expect these things, so that we can tell our town and parish councils when it is really going to happen. I've been telling them for years that don't worry, it's down for this year, it's going to get done. It's now not,
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Yes, I think all of us are probably in a similar position. Okay. Councillor Corey.
Yeah, just very quickly on this, I absolutely concur with comments made by my colleagues across the political spectrum. Costs are only going in one direction. So it's not just can we have a list of what's been bumped, but that's going to have a cost implication. So there's a false economy in this. So we want to know what are the consequences of bumping these schemes down the road. No pun intended. For example, I will, raise the point of Fen Road, Washingborough. 2 years ago, this was scheduled. It's not going to start now till next year, apparently. What are the cost implications of having a 1-2 year delay on this? To the public purse, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks, I was going to say, isn't it? I can hear a pin drop then. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's regarding the 103 pupils that use loan transport. It's going to reduce in future years, it says, obviously with the SEND provision when it becomes available. When do you expect this to start making a difference? And in the meantime, what increase do you expect year on year in percentage terms? And what does it mean in actual cost if it doesn't reduce? Thank you. Michelle.
Michelle, thank you, Michelle.
I can't answer that. I don't know if any officers in the room can answer that.
Martin, there's got to be a Martin somewhere that can answer that one.
So I think when it comes to the loan transport, which is often around children who are experience great vulnerability through either permanent exclusion or special educational needs and disabilities, there will always be a group of children that probably will need to be transported alone, as it were, for safety reasons, safety for themselves, safety for others, safety for a driver, and that might be where a PA, a passenger assistant, also has to go alongside. I think as the broader strategy of better belonging settles and the original building communities of specialist provision, a bit of a long title, settles as well, the intention always was for children to be educated as close to home as possible. Therefore, if you can build the sufficiency in the system, that gives you the opportunity for children to move and become closer to their home as such, which then negates potentially the need for transportation. That said, just to be clear, within the church of sort of SEND and disabilities, there will always be a group of children who will need movement and transportation because of comorbidities, equipment, all of those things that really, help them survive to be able to engage in education. So in terms of tempering expectations, there will always be some children who require that loan transport or specialised transport. And it's important to remember that. That said, we've also seen, with that significant increase in demand over the last 5 to 10 years, that group's also increased. And because of sufficiency, you're then having to go into the independent market, which might be some distance away from your home. And it is the only way to get them there. We have the duty to transport. There is no other pupil going that way. Or it's not a efficient direct route to combine transport, so then they end up in loan transport as well. I hope, Nicole, I did you justice.
You more than did justice, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, I think the other bit is to provide some assurance as well, is that we regularly review those children's needs in conjunction with colleagues in children's services, and we also regularly review with the parent or carer, because we want those children to become as independent as they possibly can do. So their need for PAs, their need for individual transport hopefully changes over time, and what we're able to do then is take that movement and that positive step forward in reducing their transport needs down. So it is a constant review, not in a disruptive way, but in a really positive and supportive way.
Thank you, Jimmy. Sorry. Councillor Brooks, would you
it's
like
fine,
to...
I don't mind. So in terms of percentage-wise, do you know a rough idea how much it's increasing by? Because I know that send is going through the roof, and I can't see it slowing down anytime soon. So I was just interested in loan transport, if you could say maybe 5%, 10%, whatever you think it may be. Thank you.
I don't have that specific figure here, and I would hate to give you an incorrect one, but I can get that to you.
Thank you. Can I just have a quick word whilst we're on the send transport situation? And it's a very, very difficult area, I totally understand. And I'm sure this is the case, that's what I wanted to clarify in my mind. When you're in a situation where there's a spot for the child to be 10 miles away, do you always opt for providing the transport, or do you ask the parents first whether or not they're able to do it? It's just that I transport my child to, we don't get free transport because it's very complicated, but it's actually to Boston Grammar School. It costs us money, and we do it because it's our child, it's parental responsibility. But, and I'm sure I know the answer to this, but is it always checked whether the parents can and possibly should provide the transport themselves if they can do that? Thank you.
Thank you. So certainly wherever placements are considered, we always look for the school that's closest to home, but there is a national shortage of placements in special schools and in the independent sector. It isn't just about allocating a child to a school in the SEND system. Under the Code of Practice, we have to do a 15-day consultation with a copy of the HCP with the setting to see if they can meet the needs of the child or young person. So it's not a simple process of there's the place, the child can go there. It's around whether that provision can meet need. And quite often they'll say no, or it's inefficient use of resources. We do have conversations around the transport implications where a placement has been found, and that goes in a number of different ways. That balance of cost of delivering the transport against a cost of placement. Simply, cheap placement but really expensive transport might not be the best solution. Do we have a more costly placement that reduces the transport? We work through that detail together with the providers. In terms of another element is a number of these cases of transport under SEND becomes part of the HCP and legislation of us satisfying our statutory duty to provide the education. They're not necessarily eligible. They're eligible because of sufficiency or distance, or it's part of their EHCP. What I can say, probably back towards your question, Councillor Brooks, is around how many EHCPs have loan transport written in. I think in the last 12 months, only 7 actually had it written in because it was absolutely necessary. However, there may be more because of those other complexities, just to assure you.
Yeah, my question was is it always by default, if a child has to go obviously to a special SEND school, by default, do we automatically say we'll provide transport, or is it discussed with the parent whether or not they should do it? Because, as I say, it's difficult to say that it's not fair, but if it's a situation where if automatically we'll provide the transport for a child that's going to a SEND school, but not a child that's going to a standard school, I think that to me is a little bit unfair, even though, yes, I know that. And also, I do find it a bit strange that parents don't, and also that parents may not want to take their child. If you've got a child with SEND needs, so putting them into a taxi with a stranger probably isn't the best thing for the mental health. So my question really is it always automatically, and by law, do we have to provide that transport, whether or not the parent could actually transport their child to the school or not?
So I think it's I can give you a really complex response to that layered question. So no, it's not an automatic unless it's built into the EHCP right at the very beginning, and then we have statutory duty to do it. I think what we try to do with all parents, regardless of whether their children are going to a mainstream school or a specialist school or an AP provision, is have the conversation with them at the earliest opportunity of when your child is going to school, have a think about how you're going to get your child to school. So that's where we start off as a council. How are you going to get your child to school? And then we work back from that position as to whether you can, whether the child is eligible, therefore for us to provide the transport, and then what kind of transport that's going to be. So it's multi-layered. I think, to be fair to the majority of parents that we work with, there are very few that would fit into the category of, oh, that's all over to you and that's your responsibility. A lot of the time it's because there's more than one child, the child's needs are very, very complex, and actually it's much less stressful situation for them. Because when they get to school, we want to make sure that they're in the right zone for wanting to learn as well. So it is quite complex, but no, there's not an automatic unless, of course, it's stated in the EHCP.
Thank you, Nicole. I will ask one last question. I've been very chatty today, haven't I? How has the new white paper going to affect the better belonging that we've come up with this great, fantastic idea? Is it a lot different? Is it going to affect it? And lastly, I take what Councillor Hill said. If they're going to provide 90% of the funding for the overspend, the councils that have really spent far, far too much more money than they should do are probably going to benefit from that. They should. I'm not saying it's not fair, is it? It's a pity there's not some sort of incentive around the fact that of being prudent rather than actually spending it, whether there's something. But that's obviously two questions.
Thank you. Okay, so a note of caution. Obviously, the white paper and the SEND element of the white paper published on Monday is subject to consultation. It'll have a 12-week consultation, therefore the contents within may change after that journey. And it will go on a 2.5-year legislative journey as well. So anything I say is kind of treated with caution because it's not finalised or factual. In terms of our Better Belonging strategy, that's obviously around special school expansion, and it's also around mainstream hubs. In the white paper, it proposes the development and the expectation of inclusion bases being available within schools and settings, particularly secondary schools. These inclusion bases will either be support bases or specialist bases. The specialist bases would be commissioned by the local authority as it's proposed within the white paper. Therefore, that would be the mainstream hub model that we're currently rolling out with schools. So the names will change in terms of their input, and it's likely how they are funded and the community of young people that would attend them may need to change. But that thought of a specialist space within a mainstream setting to meet needs of children runs through. So there are a lot of synergies there. The local authority in the white paper is also still tasked with, or proposed still to be tasked with, the SEND sufficiency duty. So although our responsibilities and duties will change, it will still be the duty of the local authority to make sure that there are the right spaces in the right areas for the right needs of children moving forward. So we would need to continue with that forecasting, projecting where do we need to go next. So there are synergies there.
Thanks, that's great. So all your hard work's not gone to waste. That's fantastic. On my list, I've got Councillor Vernon. Do you want to come back? You had some other questions,
Yes,
I believe.
please. When I was speaking previously, it was just to add into some information on Councillor Dilks. I've got 2 points. One, obviously, I do sit on the Highway Scrutiny panel as well, and I'm aware that home to school transport is not just an issue that affects SEN, it's an issue that affects basically every child going to school in Lincolnshire, quite honestly. And we've talked a lot on the Highway Scrutiny panel about increasing parental awareness at the very first stage possible when they're considering admissions for their child, to try and sort of, I think there is an expectation from some parents that transport is automatically provided, regardless of where the school is. And I wondered if that was being sort of adopted fully throughout the process. If I may just go on and ask my second question, obviously we've discussed the highways aspects which I had concerns about. But on page 55, the waste position, this is an unbelievable variance. Obviously you're talking about there being 2.9 million less than the 5.2 million that was in the medium-term financial plan. I'd like to ask why that is, and whether we're confident, and I know from the report that you are already scrutinising those figures. I'm not sure who to direct this to, so I'm just looking broadly. But yeah, that is a massive difference, and I can appreciate the impact that's having on the figures. And yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that as well, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Michelle, are you the expert on waste?
I'm not the expert on waste, but I can talk a bit about the budget, and then I'll look to the expert on waste and homeschool transport following that, if that's okay. So the budget was set for the current year based on a trend of electricity sales prices, which I'm sure Nicole will tell you don't reflect your domestic bills, but clearly we've in the previous years we've had some real pressures in our cost base in terms of what energy has cost us, and that's kind of reflected in the income that we've earned through the energy from waste plant. So the budget was set based on recent activity over recent years, but as prices have dropped, that has also dropped in terms of our sales income, and that's reflected in the current year budget. I'm sure Nicole can give you a much more technical response on that, and hopefully with the homeschool transport question as well.
Nicole, just before you come in, may I just ask as well, sort of obviously these figures have significantly reduced, and what the impact of that is on next year's budget, which has obviously just been set, and the considerations towards that, because that loss of income is quite significant. Thank you.
So if I deal with the waste first, because we're on that agenda. So yes, as Michelle's described, the energy that we get through the energy from waste facility is on the commodities market, so it's incredibly volatile, and so our ability to forecast is constrained by a number of things. It's constrained by we don't know what waste we're going to get, but we can average it. We don't know the quality or the burn rate of that waste, but we can average it, and we also don't know what the market's going to do. So what we do is the look forward test, where we look at what has happened the previous years and make best plans, wars aside, etc., which obviously have an impact. And then we do what we call a look back test, which is where we actually get the definitive information, and between what we forecast and what we've actually put through that facility, there can be significant swings. It's been the case for kind of quite some time. With regards to what other things that are different in waste with regards to the coming year, one of the big impacts is going to be the food waste that goes into households. People will have already seen half the county have got their bins for that. So that starts with 44 district councils in April. The big difference is it takes food waste out of the energy from waste plant. So bear with me on this one, because it sounds a little bit counterintuitive. So it means we're not putting as much volume through the energy from waste plant, which might sound like then we're not going to get as much electricity out of it at the end. However, the big difference is the gate fee. So what we would pay for food waste to come out and go through an anaerobic digestive plant is between £10 and £20 per tonne. it costs us between £120 and £145 per tonne to process it through an energy from waste plant. So that's a significant saving for us. So we're estimating when we go live in the first year with 4 district councils, that's estimating a cost saving for about 1.67 million. When the other 3 councils go live in autumn of this year, we will obviously have a part year saving, which is approximately another 1.3 million. Just adding to that, some of the other savings, which then bring us back up into hopefully what will be a balanced budget, is that the South Holland District Council at the moment currently don't have bins throughout the area, and they still are very much dependent on bags. What we have agreed through the Waste Partnership is they are going to go for a big bang effect, so they're going to introduce twin streams, they're going to introduce the food waste and bins all at the same time. So we've been working really closely with them on that. But one of the big things there is that obviously there's about £500,000 that will come in from that district alone from moving to twin stream, so having the paper and card. And then the other impact of that is there's probably about another £250,000 that will come up in from the volume of waste that gets processed through the energy from waste plant. So it will not only clear up the contamination in recycling, because that's really costly for us to process, but it also again impacts on the quality of what's going through the energy from waste plant. So there's a lot of factors there that are playing that make that that will hopefully make up that difference with the loss of energy from the energy from waste.
Thank you. That was really, really interesting and useful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm glad it's so straightforward. Thank you.
Did you also want me to just come back on the school transport? So with regards to your first question, yes, the engagement with parents is had a fundamental change for us. So working with children's services right from the very point in which you make an admission for your child, we've begun to reset the language so that actually it moves away from those expectations that your child that is our problem to get to school, or it's our responsibility. So that you'll see that now is beginning to go through all of our communications with parents and carers right from the very beginning. And if I may, Councillor Brooks, in regards to your question about the single occupancy transport, we're running at about 13%, so there's been about a 1% increase on that.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Councillor Collier.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't forgotten about you.
Thank you very much. It's the Sens Transport again. I was just wondering, if you've got a child that's a single occupancy in a car or any of the transport, how do you pay this in advance, the transport to the companies, or do they put in a bill for each day? Because it just went through my mind, what happens if a child, especially with a single occupancy, goes into hospital or is off sick for some length of time? Are we still paying that company for that transport?
Okay. So what we have is contracts with dedicated suppliers. So they're people who work in a very niche area for us because many of the children will have behavioural issues as well as medical issues. So what we do is we work on a large contract with them that will be based on our ability to forecast at the beginning of each term how many children that we will need to be able to transport in that way. Sometimes they are short-term contracts because a child's need can change for exactly as you've described, or we will work with the parent, and the parent will actually result in having a travel plan, and they will then move to taking their child to school. So we don't pay if we know in advance that child is not going to be needed to be transported, and very often that transport can then be utilised in a different way.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Councillor Corey, I've got you down. Am I wrong, or have you...
Happily for everyone in the room, no, I don't need to
That's
say
all
anything.
right. I'll cross you out then. I didn't want to miss you out. Okay, Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start by declaring DPI that I'm on the Board of Trustees for Boston Grammar School, and that's a point I'm going to make. And thank you for choosing Boston Grammar School, Councillor Roberts. I'm an old boy myself, and it's a great school. So on the topic of the 29 million deficit for the schools, I attended the Board of Trustees meeting the other day on Tuesday, where I learned that 1/3 of the students speak English as a second language, and that's at a grammar school. And obviously you'd expect you need pretty good English skills to get through the 11 plus and such like. So in other schools, perhaps even higher. And I know that Tower Road, I've got about 5 or 6 schools in my division, so there's probably a fair few with higher numbers than that. And I was informed that some of the money to pay for uplifting these students to get to the English level to, you know, pass their exams and whatnot, comes from SEND and also other pots. So I'm wondering, how much do we know about this, and how much of an impact is that having on the deficit? Because that is only going to increase, even if we get the grant to level off the 30 million.
I won't come to Michelle, she's looking stressed.
You can come back to me if you want offline, but...
Martin Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor French. So I think on that case, particularly around the schools, EAL, or English as an additional language, doesn't usually feature underneath the SEND legislation or SEND need. So I think we might need to probably have a bit of a follow-up conversation just to clarify. I think in terms of the support that children with an additional language require will be funded, and there will be provision made for through school funding, through the national funding formula and the indices of deprivation and pupil characteristics. That's lagged funding. It's based on census the year before, and it plays through to the school for the financial year. So there may well be pressures presented within a school, but I think the DFE's national funding formula would say it provides a level of resilience through pupil premium, high needs funding in the sense of, and now I've said it, I've remembered, there's a line that says high needs prevalence in the funding. That doesn't mean special needs. It's a different line that they're utilising. Just for assurances, in terms of VAL, there are services within the local authority to support schools with that, and schools make really good use of that service as well. But it doesn't directly, the question you make isn't around the SEND deficit. That burden, if you like, would be faced by schools, which should be absorbed through their school budget.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Councillor Hill. I hadn't forgotten.
Yeah, thank you. Briefly, I mean, in terms of energy from waste, it is volatile. I remember, was it the last budget but one, we suddenly got an extra 4 million out we didn't know about. So it is swings and roundabouts, and what we lose from energy from waste, we gain from lower electricity prices. So it is volatile. So just to clarify, in terms of the white paper reforms, I think we mostly welcome, although the timescale is ridiculously long, and obviously a big question mark whether the government will get it through its own backbenchers, because, as we know, entitlement can be, for parents, can be quite a volatile situation. So, but I'm assuming write-offs won't include extra transporting costs, so they will still be a burden for some years. We're talking 2030, I think, before anything really happens. But the main plus of the white paper is that affordability will be a criteria for the council, which is a biggie. But whether it gets through the Labour backbenchers is debatable. But the transport will still be lumbered with. That will not be written off, will it? Is that right?
That's my understanding, that what's been discussed as part of the settlement, that it will be just restricted to the dedicated schools grant, and obviously all of the transport sits outside of that.
Thank you. Yes, what we thought. Thank you very much. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you very much. Just to come back to Councillor Dilks' point, I think it's very clear what we're asking for here. All members, not just in this chamber, but all members are told what work within their division is in the current highways plan, whether it's this year, 2 years, 3 years. The moment there is any change to that, that member is told this has been moved or removed or whatever it will be. Very simple, very transparent. I also think there'd be a benefit to having a similar information shared with members around property rationalisation as well, because I've had a bit of a a shock recently around some changes from what's being made on that as well. So I think just for officers' benefit, that transparency on if anything is being changed, we need to make sure the members are aware rather than them having to find off their own back, because that then creates issues and gets us rather wound up. The other point I have as well to raise around the MRP, so the current percentage is 4.37. I presume that we've got a forward forecast of our percentage over the next 10 years along with our capital programme, I presume.
Yeah, so the prudential indicators would have set that out. That was all part of the budget book on Friday for future years. And we set ourselves a limit of 10%, so we know that we're working within those indicators.
Thank you, Michelle. Any Councillor French?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Nicole's answers earlier about the food waste bins. I do kind of want to add on to that something of my own when there's a contingent of residents in my area who I don't think want to support these anaerobic facilities at all because they live near one and it's dramatically reduced their quality of life. And they are very forthcoming with their views on that. They can no longer enjoy a summer afternoon in the garden because of the smell of the facility which they live near, and they can no longer drive safely down their own street because Anglian water lorries go up and down it all day long and have absolutely destroyed the road there. So if you thought Grove Scrutiny was bad the other week, you probably should have been at my parish meeting when the representative from Anglian Water showed up. So on to the question of basically what are they're going to have to go through pain to put these bins in place, and they already are. What savings are they going to see with this 1.67 million, did you say? Like what are they going to see that can justify this pain that they have to go through?
Thank you, Nicole.
Okay, so I think it'd be helpful just to clarify, there are different types of AD plant. So there is only one in Lincolnshire that deals with food waste. I believe the ones you'll be referring to are the ones that deal with agriculture or animal waste, which are nothing to do with this project at all. But however, I know that they are they cause a lot of noise. So it's very, very different process. We can't process food waste through those facilities at all. It has to be very, very different. And then with regards to the savings, well, you know, each year we are dealing with more and more waste, and that requires a cost to dispose of it and a cost of collecting it. So the more efficient we can be, the more that we can divert waste out of the most costly way of actually getting rid of it, the greater the savings will be and the less burden there will be on the council's budget.
Thank you, Nicole. Any further questions? Councillor Collier.
Yeah, just something come to mind there. At the moment, that's going to be a free service. Am I right? Or is this something that's going to be charged for in the future, like we do with our garden waste?
Food waste, are you referring to? No, it's part of the free service. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Any further questions? No. Excellent. Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of the item. I move that the report to the executive has been considered and all the comments in relation to the report will be passed over and captured by the Health and Scrutiny Officer to report to the executive ahead of its consideration on the 3rd of March. Do I have a seconder? So Brooks. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Just a few. I believe that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be lots of information there to pass to the executive. Right, on to the item 11, which is non-debatable, which is the Scrutiny Committee's work programmes. The report is on pages 101 to 130, provides an overview of the work programmes and other Scrutiny Committees that the Board has oversight of. Discussions on details of particular items are appropriately held at the relevant meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. Should you wish to comment on any of these, please approach our Scrutiny Officer following today's meeting. The report is for noting, therefore, if members have any comments, please liaise. Go on then. Councillor Parkinson.
You're very kind, thank you. Am I allowed to make one
sorry,
comment?
yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Vernon.
All it is, I have raised this previously, I am concerned about the lack of work programme in the Highways Scrutiny Panel. I did raise it at Highways, but I think as OSMB it's important we have sight of that as well at this meeting. So I'm very grateful to you for allowing me to comment, as I appreciate it's not traditional to under that item, but as I say, I think it's important for OSMB to note the lack of, the lack of anything in the Highway Scrutiny Programme after the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that will appear in our at some point. Yes, Councillor
Also, do we
Parkinson.
know when the review of the white paper we brought to Children's, is that something that can be shared with members as well, as and when? Because obviously the sooner the better, really.
Yes, I think that's been noted. That's excellent. Okay, on to item 12, Revenue Scrutiny Management Board.
Mr. Chairman.
Pardon, yes, Councillor
I
Dilks.
wonder if I might have two penneth in that one. I did ask colleagues will be aware, I did ask about a review of scrutiny, the way this council does scrutiny at full council, and the leader, I asked the leader, if you remember, a question, and he said he would consult with officers and see what might be possible. I do think it is, a review of scrutiny is due, and it would be helpful given the new administration, and so I would request that that is put on the future agenda for OSMB to consider and to move ahead with. I think it should be instituted by, we are the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, so, I think it would be suitable. I don't know what others would think, but thank you.
Yes, I'm sure that can be, that'll be noted. I'm sure we can add that too. So, the last report on, which is the Overview Scrutiny Management Board Work Programme on pages 131 to 140, provides an overview of the contents of our work programme, which will obviously increase over the weeks. It's not massively full, but I'm sure we'll get full of many things, hopefully including highways. The suggested proposal, there's two actually corrections to the published work programme on the Council Plan Performance Framework 26 to 27 is due for a decision by the Executive on the 9th of June. I believe it's incorrect in the actual form. And also the review of the financial performance 25-26 outturn is due for a decision by the Executive on the 14th of July 26. So there's a few errors in that. Therefore, I ask that the amendments be reflected in the next iteration. What a great word. Councillor Hill.
Just to support Councillor Dilks, we are the and actually it shouldn't be the executive which decide what is scrutinised. It is for the rest of us to scrutinise what they're doing. So I welcome the indication from the leader, but it shouldn't be the executive who leads on this. I think there's quite a few. I mean, actually, it's quite light at the moment. For example, I will be having a word with Cara. I didn't do it last month to put some suggestions in which you and the chairman and the vice chairman can look at. Just off the top of my head, we did mention last time about having some sort of overview or reporting back on what the mayoral combined authority is doing. We did see the mayor with her briefcase.
Very nice colour.
Well, yeah, no comment. I'll say no comment. I did wonder. So I'll have a conversation, but I see performance is part of this now, which is good. Obviously, we can only performance monitor once we've got some KPIs to look at. So I suppose that's something that we need to put on the agenda. Whether it was anyway, I'll leave that there. I did wonder currently, discussion about children's services. There is a big increase in their budget, which will happen in April. Also, there is a lot of money. We keep every meeting we seem to be hearing about money coming here, money coming, lots of money being transferred from other parts of the council, bluntly. And I know it's a difficult area, but as I've said at the meeting earlier, I do wonder if enough is being done to actually try and control the costs. So I know that we have a children's scrutiny, but I think they mainly focus on service delivery. I just wonder if this committee, which is responsible for finance, whether we could have a meeting sometime, one of the agenda items sometime, to get some assurance from Children's Services that they, despite the pressures they are under, they are actually controlling costs. If we're not careful, it will gobble up everybody's budget, despite the extra money we have. So I wonder, and I just put that on in public here, Chairman, whether you think that would be useful, based on finance, not on service delivery, if you feel that would be a useful exercise, because and also all the issues about the white paper, what may or may not happen and how that impacts on them. So I just wonder, and purely focusing on finance, whether that would be felt that was an appropriate agenda item sometime in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I think the more we scrutinise, the better. That's what we're here for. Councillor Corey.
Yeah, as a member of that committee, I support Councillor Hill's suggestion. I think this committee would be a really good place to discuss in detail the finance of that. I know Councillor Collier.
Councillor Collier.
Yeah, as chair of that committee, I'd also support that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. I think we're in agreement. I think there's lots of changes coming up over the next 12 months. I think there are more things we scrutinise. Myself and Councillor Parkinson are both on the GLCCA anyway. I think we're quite keen on the GLCCA. Yes, I think it has. Yeah, it has. Okay, so
I think I spoke to Cara about it previously about bringing it to this committee. No, I know, but I think it is.
It will be. It will be there. It will be there. Don't worry. It will be there. Okay. Yeah, it'll definitely be on there at some point. Okay. Therefore, I ask that the amendments reflected in the next iteration of the work programme. I ask that members have any further comments or suggestions of items to be added to our future agendas. Please liaise with the Health Scrutiny Officer following this meeting. Therefore, that concludes the business of this meeting. Thank you for your attendance.